Hello everybody and welcome to another video where we will be taking a deep dive into 7 of the fights taking place this weekend at UFC 246 from a betting perspective. And it feels amazing to say that because it's been so long since I put a YouTube video out. It's been almost a month, so I can't wait to get back on the horse this weekend for UFC 246. But before we get talking about those fights, I want to speak to you guys about a few things because we haven't talked in a while. And first of all, it is really important that we all give ourselves a massive pat on the back because 2019 was another profitable year for us, and it's really fucking hard to make money gambling on any sport. So when you grind out any kind of profit, it's really important at the end of the year to take a look back and be proud of the achievement, because 2019 was a tough year. You know, the UFC had more events in different countries outside the United States than ever before. You know, sketchy refereeing, even sketchier judging, a lot of cards full with low-level talent and really difficult matchups to cap. So any kind of profit in 2019 was great, and we made a solid profit, man, we should all be proud of. So I want to say a massive thank you to anyone watching this that supported me throughout 2019. If you watch my videos, if you like my videos, if you DM'd me, if you sent me an email, if you left a comment on one of my videos, if you became a member of my website, if you subscribed to my website, any way you interacted with me in 2019, man, I want to thank you like on a level that I can't even put into words, because you make my 2019 great, and I promise you I am working my fucking bollocks off to make sure that 2020 is another profitable year for us, and I'm really going to work hard to make sure that we do as best as we possibly can, and that begins this weekend on UFC 246. I want to help you guys learn as much as you can from me, and I also want to help you guys consistently put your money in strong positions so that win or lose, you know, it doesn't matter. You know, over the long term, there's a very, very good chance that you're going to make some cash. Now, I put out the first YouTube video on this channel almost 1 year ago to this day. And my website has been around for like 6 years. So, you know, for the first 5 years, I had like a hardcore community on my website, but there really wasn't that much traffic, really not that many people that visited it each day. And it was kind of just me doing my thing, just a website for me to kind of like track my bets, put breakdowns out, written breakdowns out and stuff like that. It was all good. And then when I put the YouTube videos out there this time last year, things exploded, and to be honest with you, I wasn't ready for it. Like, I completely wasn't ready for the reaction that these videos got, and 2019 was just an absolute whirlwind for me. And for much of the year, honestly, boys, like, I felt like I was drowning. Like, my workload in 2019 was insane, and I'm not complaining because I fucking loved it. I loved every minute of it, and I loved every single minute I spent talking to you guys in my chat room, responding to your comments on YouTube. I loved it all, man, but it was fucking tough. Like, there were some weekends last year, you know, those weekends where we'd have like a Bellator on a Friday night and then a Bellator and a UFC on a Saturday, where I honestly, man, I'm not exaggerating, I felt like I was taking years off my life with how fucking hard it was. And a lot of the reason why it was so difficult was because I just didn't have the infrastructure to kind of deal with the amount of content that I was having to produce and the amount of work I was having to do compared to previous years. So I just kind of jumped into this YouTube thing. And a big part of that was just not having the information available to help you guys. So every week I found I would spend so much time answering emails and DMs and YouTube comments and questions from people in my chat room on my website, and I'd basically be answering the same questions around like, what are the best betting websites to use, you know, what is the best bankroll management strategy to use, you know, things like that, how to prolong the lifespan of accounts when they get shut down by betting sites, different things like this. And I'd also find myself talking about the same fights over and over and over again in my chat room. People would come into my chat room like 20 times throughout the week and ask me if I would be researching this specific Bellator fight or this specific UFC fight. And all this took time. And over the last month, even though I haven't been that active on YouTube or social media, what I did was to set myself up for a better 2020 when I can focus more time on producing quality content for you guys. I decided to spend the last month building a solid infrastructure where I've got information available on the website or through YouTube videos where when someone asks me a question on what are the best betting websites to use, what are the best betting sites to live bet on the UFC at, what's the best type of bankroll management to use, instead of me having to, respond to emails, DMs, comments in the chat room, which all takes time, I can just have a YouTube video there or an article that I can link people to, send to people and say, hey, check this out. And I think if I do that, that is just going to free up so much of my time, more time that I can use to create content for you guys. And I've already taken huge steps towards that over the last month. The content isn't all ready yet, but I've really put a lot of time into producing it. And it's a lot of new stuff is going to be coming soon. And one of the first things that I've launched, well, two things actually, two new additions to my website. The first addition is a notification system. So I found that throughout last year, a lot of people would just come to my website and keep asking me the same questions, like, have you researched this fight? Are you going to be researching Bellator this weekend? So now I've got a notification system on my website where I can actually send you guys notifications. So when you come to my homepage, at the moment there's one on there. You'll see it pop up in the bottom left here. Bam. And we've got on there about live betting spaces currently being available. But I can put anything I want here. I could put, I'm currently researching Bellator. I'll let you know if I've got any bets. Keep checking your emails and I'll email you, that kind of thing. So that's one of the first time savers I've made, this notification system. It's only a small thing. But the other thing that I'm really, really, really happy with, I think that is going to be a little bit of a game changer, is that I now live stream my research for every single fight. So I research every single UFC and every single Bellator fight. And I now live stream that entire process. So you could catch live streams on my website pretty much every day of the week. Tomorrow we've got one scheduled in at 1 p.m. British time, 1 p.m. in the afternoon. I'm going to be live streaming my research for the fight between Claudia Gadelha and Alexa Grasso. And then once the live streams for each fight is done, I've got a live stream archive, and you can see the live stream archive here at the bottom. So if we click into it, you can see we've got a 2-hour 20-minute long video on the Ferreira versus Pettis fight, a 2-hour video on the Greene versus Oleinik fight, a 3.5-hour video on Dawson versus Skelly, a fucking 4-hour live stream on the McGregor versus Cerrone fight, and I've also got written breakdowns for every single fight and betting advice for every single fight as well. So what this enables me to do is when people are coming in and asking me questions throughout the week on specific fights, instead now of me having to spend, 20 minutes, half an hour having these discussions in the chat room, I can just link people to these long research videos, these long videos, and people can watch them where I answer all the questions on the fights. This is another time saver for me. I'm not going to be making these videos available on YouTube simply because the majority of people watching my videos don't like long form content. At the end of the day, most people won't want to watch a 3.5-hour video breakdown on the fight between Chaz Skelly and Grant Dawson. So if I start to put videos like this up on my channel, it'll destroy my channel metrics, which will completely fuck my ability to get ranked high on YouTube searches, basically. So this content's just specific to my website, just specific to my members, but this is what I've been working on, and I'm really proud of it. And now I'm going to be, like I say, live streaming almost every day of the week. So if you do love getting balls deep on fights, if you do like long form content, and if you do like learning from me, man, because these live streams, they're very interactive. We research these fights together, love taking people's opinions on board, and love answering questions during the live streams. If you're into all that kind of stuff, I recommend you check it out, man, because I have a lot of fun with it. And you know what? Do you know the best part? Here you can see, we research these fights together. And you know what the best part about researching these fights together is actually made researching fights way more fun for me, because with the, you know, like with any job, you get bogged down by the dogma and the repetitive nature of jobs, and sat here by myself researching fights all day, it does get a bit boring. So it's really spiced things up now that I'm doing it with you guys, and I really enjoy interacting with you, taking your opinions on board, and you're also, a lot of you drop serious knowledge, which helps me out and makes me think about things differently in a way I wouldn't have looked at them before. But obviously the live streams are not just for my website, because I want to bring you guys as much content watching only on YouTube as possible. So whenever there is a fight where I can use, you know, fight footage that were available to broadcast on platforms like YouTube and Twitch, I will be live streaming my research for those sessions on YouTube and Twitch. And yes, I have now got my ability to live stream on YouTube back. So tomorrow night, Thursday the 16th of January at 9 PM, I have already scheduled it in. We are going to be live streaming my research for the fight between Askarov and Tim Elliott. So together we can look at the footage, we can watch the footage of these guys together, break them down and see if there's any decent betting opportunities on this fight. And I'm really looking forward to getting into a live stream with you guys, because it's been 3 months, man, since I was able to live stream on YouTube. And of course, we are multi-channel, boys, so we will also be live streaming on Twitch and Mixer, all 3 platforms at the same time. So wherever you like to watch my live streams, you'll be able to get it, man. I'm really looking forward to doing that tomorrow. And at this point in the video, before we get into talking about fights, I just want to strike a business deal with you. You guys know that I like to do business deals. So if this video gets 500 likes, I will do a breakdown video. Actually, I won't do a breakdown video because it'll take way too long to record, plan, edit, and upload. I will do a live stream on Saturday where I will break down the remaining 5 fights that I won't be covering in this video. So we're doing 7 in this video. I will live stream my research for the remaining 5, and I will also hunt for a prop bet on every single fight taking place this weekend to give you a prop bet to bet on the fights as you can, make them more interesting. If you don't know what a prop bet is just a highly specific bet, such as Conor McGregor to win by knockout or TKO. That would be a prop. So in that live stream, we'll go through every single fight that takes place on this card to try and find a decent prop. We will take this live stream very seriously. It'll be a marathon, boys. I will answer all your questions about these fights. We'll hunt for props. We'll research the remaining 5 fights, and we'll catch up, because I haven't had a chance to speak to you guys in a long ass time. But trust me, I am fucking back like the Renegade Master, ready to take this very seriously, hungry to kick off a new fucking year of MMA betting, and very, 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 very hungry to put another profitable year in the bag. And I can't fucking wait, boys. I'm itching to get started this weekend, but itching to get started does not translate into feeling impulsive and making poor betting decisions, because I am only interested in putting my money in strong positions. It's what helped us make a profit in 2019. It's what's going to help us make a profit in 2020. So even though this is a big card, an exciting card, we still need to be disciplined. We still need to make good betting decisions. So I'm looking forward to getting back on the horse this year, boys. I got some big plans, big boy creative content coming. Like, this channel is not just a predictions channel. It was never set up to be a predictions channel. I've got some creative shit coming for you this year, and I can't wait for you to fucking see it. But anyway, boys, let's get into the first fight that I want to talk about in today's video. And I've got a million tabs open. You know what? I've just shown you a bet on Nasrat Haqparast, which I'm going to share with you. But it's not actually scheduled to be the first fight that I talk about. So that's fucking awkward. We'll get to the bet on Haqparast in a minute. I just have this up because these are the 5 fights that I'll cover in a live stream on Saturday. The 5 that have still researching. And if you can't wait till Saturday, join my website and I will be live streaming my research for these fights over the next few days, starting with Yusuf and Philly tomorrow, and we can close this down. Don't forget to come along for my live stream tomorrow night. So, boys, let's get into some fight fucking research. Alright, it's about time we get into some fight research. The first fight that I want to talk about in today's video is going to be Brian Kelleher against Osbourne. Now, I was a little bit disappointed when I began researching this fight, because, before I jump into research, I'm always on Twitter. I don't post too much on Twitter, but I like to have a little look around on Twitter to see what the general feeling is around the fights, see where people are putting their money, and this helps me to kind of gauge which fights I should prioritize researching, because if everyone online is talking about one specific guy being a very good bet, well, those are the fights that maybe I should prioritize researching so that I get in on them before obviously the odds decline. And when I started to research UFC 246 before Christmas, everyone was talking about Osbourne. A lot of people online were saying they were betting this guy. And when I researched him for myself, I was brutally disappointed. And I honestly do not know what people are seeing in him. I'm very, very confused. But obviously, the great news or the great thing about what we do is that we don't deal in opinions, we deal in facts, right? That's one of the beauties of the live stream. We can watch the footage together and ultimately we can see what is true and what is not. So the beauty of a guy like Osbourne is that all of his fights are available. Well, not all of his fights, but a lot of his recent fights are available online. So when I say I'm not that impressed by him, you don't have to take my word for it. I can actually show you. Now, obviously, we can't watch his last fight against Armando Villarreal because that was on the Contender Series. It's copyright protected on Haqparast, but I can tell you if you go and watch it, again, not that impressive, to be honest. But what we can do is watch his 3 fights before that. Now, I don't want to go any further back than his fight in 2018 because he's a young guy. He's only 28 years old. He's only had 10 pro fights. He's going to be making massive improvements from fight to fight. So the version of Osbourne we saw, back in 2016 against Corey Galloway and against Jose Calvo in 2017, it's gonna be different from the version of Osbourne we get on Saturday night against Kelleher, because he will have improved so much. But we can watch these 3 fights to give us some clues as to what to expect. Of course, you've probably noticed it is worth paying attention to the fact that all these fights have ended very quickly. So there's still a lot that we don't know about Osbourne, but at the same time, these fights do give us some clues as to his strengths and his weaknesses. So let's get into watching the first fight that I want to take you guys through. It's 4 minutes long, and it's Osbourne against Kelly Off-Field. So Osbourne, obviously the guy in the black and yellow trunks. Here you can see him coming out southpaw. Straight away, you're noticing some very, very nice kicks from the southpaw stance. Now, one thing I will say about Osbourne is that he has abnormally long arms for his wingspan. So he's 5'7" with a 72-inch reach. To put into perspective for you how crazy that reach is, if we look for, actually a terrible example, I didn't realise his reach was that long. But if we look at Ledet's got a huge reach as well, it would be just our luck. Okay, so this is a bit of a better example. So to give you an idea of how crazy Osbourne's reach is, here we've got Alexa Camur, who's fighting on this card. He is a light heavyweight. He's only got a 75-inch reach. And here we see Osbourne, who's a bantamweight, who's obviously much, much smaller than Camur, several weight classes under light heavyweight, and he's got a 72-inch reach. So not a great difference between the reach of a light heavyweight and a bantamweight. So Osbourne has got a huge reach for the division. And that is significant because Kelleher has got a pretty standard 64-inch reach for a bantamweight, which is a little bit under the average, but not crazy under the average. I think the average is like 66, 67 inches. He's got a 64-inch reach. Osbourne has got a 72-inch reach, so that is a massive 8-inch reach advantage for Osbourne, which is significant because statistically, fighters with an 8-inch reach advantage in a fight usually win around 65% of the time, which is big. But from his past fights, I don't personally feel like Osbourne uses his reach very well. Enough of the talking, let's get back into it. So we'll just see a little bit of what Osbourne brings to the table here. Fighting out the southpaw stance, very, very nice kicks. But one thing that I noticed about Osbourne is that for a guy, like I say, that does have a very long reach, doesn't use it that well, and he doesn't really fight that long. You see, just in this first 30 seconds or so, he's been caught with two very, very stiff hands from Arfield, and there you see him standing right in front of Arfield and getting caught with another right hand counter, got caught with another right hand counter there. And what you notice about Osbourne is he's very aggressive, but he doesn't fight long. He literally just stands right in front of his opponent and just exchanges big shots. I mean, if we just rewind a little bit to this exchange coming up by here, for a fighter with such a long reach, he doesn't need to be stood flat-footed in front of his opponent exchanging shots. I mean, look at this range that he's trying to fight in. Stood so close to his opponent, getting his lead leg tangled up, and he ate a few big counters because of it. So, yes, Osbourne has clearly got quite a bit of power in his hands. Definitely has some very nice technical kicks. He's a dangerous southpaw. But for me, the reach advantage isn't that important because he doesn't really know how to use it. He gets very close to his opponents, tries to fight in a phone booth. So that's the first weakness that I've noticed about Osbourne, and that's present in all the matchups I've seen from him. He did it in the Contender Series fight. He's done it in this one. He does it in the other two that we're going to watch in just a moment. But really, you see him eat a jab there. And again, he walks onto a big right hand, and you're looking at this guy and you're thinking, if we're looking at the betting odds here, we look at the odds on this fight. Osbourne's currently around about, call it an average of, say, 1.70, which is minus 143 for an implied probability of 59%. So bookies are almost capping him at 60%. And then you look at the odds on Brian Kelleher, currently around an average of 2.20, which is plus 120. Plus 120 for an implied probability of 45%. So this is one of those fights where, I know Kelleher's not great. I know he's got loads of weaknesses, but I'm looking at, look at this. Kelleher getting caught, look at this series of events here. Look at how close he stood to Arfield. He's winging big shots off balance. Look at his foot positioning. He's getting his lead leg tangled up with Arfield. Very poor footwork. Overcommitting to shots, leaving his chin up high and exposed. He's wide open to counters. You look at just these reckless exchanges here. He's done it several times in this first 2 minutes. And I know Kelleher's not a particularly big hitter. I know he's not a particularly dangerous striker. But you're looking at this and you're thinking Osbourne is, the favourite. And, this is his UFC debut. We know a large percentage of fighters lose when they make their UFC debut. He's got octagon jitters to deal with. And for me, I'm not saying that Osbourne shouldn't be the favourite. I don't really have that much of a strong opinion on it. But what I am saying is, there he eats a stiff right hand. What I am saying is I haven't seen anything in Osbourne's fights which is saying to me this guy should be a favourite over Brian Kelleher. I know Kelleher's got huge weaknesses, right? I absolutely know that he does. I know that Kelleher has bad fight IQ. I know he's easy to hit, but there's just nothing to bet. There's no foundation to bet Osbourne is what I'm trying to say. I just don't know what people are seeing here. And even in that moment there, we see some very poor takedown defense from Osbourne. He's not made to pay for it, but he does enable his opponent to get control of his body very easily. Arfield is able to get to the body lock very, very easily here. And, a slightly stronger offensive wrestler would be able to drag Osbourne to the ground, no problem. But, he gets the underhook on the right side, and Arfield's not able to capitalize on that little opening. But, Osbourne, for me, very, very questionable takedown defense, very, very questionable ground game. There we see his takedown defense finally exposed. He let his opponent get in very deep on his hips and complete that double leg takedown instead of fighting for underhooks. And, we see Arfield land right into side control. And I just want to pause it here because this is a weakness that has been present in his Contender Series fight as well. When we talk about, fighters and their ground game and their takedown defense, I always use the Team Alpha Male guys as an example, because when a fighter gets taken down, you want to behave like the Team Alpha Male guys. If you watch any Team Alpha Male fighter get taken down, you'll notice that as soon as their butt hits the ground, they immediately try to pop back to their feet like a spring. They do not let their opponent establish a dominant position. The incorrect thing to do, what you don't want to be doing, is what Osbourne is doing here, where as soon as Offield has taken him down, he's allowed Offield to flatten his shoulders out on the canvas and establish a dominant position. And this is a sign of a fighter that is very, very weak off their back. I know that Osbourne has a few submissions off his back, and to the naked eye might make it look like he's decent on the ground. Trust me, this guy is very low level on the ground, very weak off his back, and very, very poor takedown defense. Like, do not be fooled, boys, by a few submission wins. This guy is at a very low level. And here we can see, looking very, very weak off his back. You know, all Offield really needed to do there was push down on that left leg, step over into mount, and he would have a field day. Now, in this fight, Osbourne has been able to recover guard, but really that says more about what Offield done wrong than what Osbourne did right. And here we start to see him, you know, throw his right leg up. And here he just sets up the slowest triangle ever. This is literally the slowest triangle setup ever. You can see it coming from a mile away, like literally a mile away. Offield has had so many opportunities to get himself out of trouble here. The triangle setup is so fucking slow and predictable, but Offield ends up finding his head trapped in a bad position and then is forced to tap. I mean, he literally gifted Osbourne this triangle on a plate. Like, it's kind of crazy. Like, people may see that and they may be impressed by Osbourne's ground game, but the triangle setup was so slow. It is very, very, very unlikely that you will catch someone off your back, you know, a UFC level fighter off your back with that kind of submission. Osbourne is just that's a bad performance for me. You've got a guy with a long reach that doesn't know how to use it, a guy with bad striking defense, bad takedown defense, low level ground game that's weak off his back. But whatever, on to the next fight. Lots of red flags there for Osbourne. This next fight between Osbourne and Orton Daly took place back in October 2018. So if we get into this, Osbourne, obviously the guy in the white gloves, and again, you know, many of the weaknesses that we saw in his last fight, you see flashes of him in this fight as well. It doesn't last very long. It's only 2 minutes long. But I'm just not that impressed by him. I'm really not that impressed by him. And I just want to show you guys this footage because I know a lot of people watching this may have bet Osbourne. You might be really high on Osbourne. And I'm just showing you this to kind of like maybe get you to pump the brakes a little bit, hedge out of your bet, because I don't know why you'd bet Osbourne at favourite odds. I really don't. I always say the footage doesn't lie, and there are so many holes here that Kelleher could potentially exploit, especially with this being Osbourne's UFC debut. You know, I mean, the one thing that I do like from Osbourne, the one thing I think he does really well is the kicks. I like his kicking game a lot. His kicks from the southpaw stance are very, very, very technical, very nice. But again, we see his takedown defense exposed here. You know, Orton Daly literally picks him up and throws him on the ground. You know, it's not good, boys. It's not good. Osbourne recovers guard here. But again, looking very weak off his back. When you get taken down, you know, in this moment, I'll just show you an example of what I mean. When he gets taken down here, at this point, you know, there's so much space here. Daly hasn't had a chance to establish a dominant position here. When Osbourne's butt hits the ground, he's thinking about regaining guard. What he really needs to be doing is concentrating on exploding back to his feet. But instead he doesn't. He just fishes to try and regain guard. He should have been trying to use control of the head to clear his legs and get his back over tight to the cage so he could use the cage to stand back up. But he was more focused on regaining guard. It's not good, boys. It's not the way to do it. And it does show me that this guy is very, very weak off his back. I mean, even here, you know, instead of trying to work to get his back tight to the cage, to use the cage to stand back up, he's fishing for a body triangle. I mean, I just don't understand what he's doing. You know, again, he starts throwing his legs up, looking for triangles, looking for arm bars. But the setups are so deliberate. They're so obvious. Again, a slow, obvious setup on this triangle attempt, and again, his opponent tries to slam out of it, just like we saw from Offield. Ends up putting himself in a worse position, enabling Osbourne to tighten the triangle up, and Daly's forced to tap. But again, you're not going to be getting away with these mistakes against UFC level fighters, and we can see another performance here from Osbourne against the same guy actually. And again, look, even in this position, I mean, Daly's not landing anything, but look at the proximity that Osbourne is stood right in front of him, getting his lead leg all tangled up in a very, very hittable position. And I just, look, he's a young fighter. He's only had 10 pro fights. He's going to be making big improvements from fight to fight, but I don't know why this guy is the favourite. I just don't. I don't see anything from this guy that shows me that he deserves to be a favourite over an established UFC fighter. There are a lot of holes here, a hell of a lot of holes, and we don't need to watch any more of this. I've made my point. But when I finished researching this fight, I went into my VIP chat room, and I said, boys, I think I've found a great bet for this weekend. Osbourne isn't good. There's no reason why he should be the favourite here. He's got tons of weaknesses. I know Kelleher's not great, but as an underdog, I think there's value here. And the great part about my community is there's some really knowledgeable, switched on, great guys in there that have got really good information, and they help me out loads. And I'm not going to name this guy. I'm not going to give him a shout out because he asked me not to. But one of the guys in the VIP chat room said, I understand why you think Kelleher might be a good bet, but I used to train with Kelleher. I know this guy, he is a friend, and I just can't trust him with my money. No matter how bad the other guy is, I can't trust him with my money because he's chaos. Bad fight IQ, questionable life decisions, not the doesn't make the best career choices or the best training choices or the best diet choices. And people say things like this all the time, but I really respect this guy. I talked to this guy many times in the past. I respect his opinion. And I was like, okay, do you know what? Kelleher does have a history of missing weight. I'll just wait and see what happens until fight week. I'll see where the odds are on fight week. I'll see what Kelleher's saying in his fight week interviews, and then I'll make a decision. And then lo and behold, a few days after we had that conversation, Kelleher posts this. Carb deficit, about to go to 3 workouts deep today just to get my weight down. Weight won't move, fuck this shit. Hey pal, wanna not cut weight and just fight at our natural weight healthily? I'm sure you'd agree, send a new contract. Kelleher then said, I'm surprised they don't allow fighters and opponents to agree on not cutting weight and fighting at the natural weights instead. Can't we all do a Cerrone versus McGregor, please? So, like clockwork, just like this guy told me, no matter how Kelleher matches up with his opponent stylistically, there's always X factors outside the cage which could, really have a massive impact on how he performs. Now, what I will say is that he posted this picture, this week, and he looks in phenomenal shape, but it's tough to trust a guy with a long history of missing weight, a long history of questionable fight IQ, and straight from the horse's mouth, we've heard from one of his training partners that this guy leads a bit of a crazy life, and it's probably not to be trusted with money. So it is very, very tough. It is very tough. There's a lot to consider in this matchup. So the way I look at this is, based on the performances I've seen, there is no way that you can bet Osbourne as a favourite. There's just nothing there, boys. Bad takedown defence, bad ground game, questionable striking defence. I'm not seeing it, boys. I'm really not. And I know a few people will say, fucking old Osbourne is a training partner of Montel Jackson, that just ran through Brian Kelleher. But boys, Devin Clark trains with John Jones. Would you use that logic to go bet on Devin Clark? No, you fucking wouldn't. There's a huge difference between Montel Jackson and Ode Osbourne. Montel Jackson was on the United States Olympic wrestling team. So when I hear people say they are betting Ode Osbourne because he trains with Montel Jackson, who's just beat Brian Kelleher, it's the dumbest shit I've ever heard in my life. Stop it. Stop it, stop it, stop it. It means absolutely nothing. So it's a tricky one for me because Kelleher is very, very tempting. If we look at his odds at the moment, currently around about 2.20, and they are improving. But at an implied probability of 45%, if we know that this guy's chaos and he might have had a horrendous weight cut, or he might be making really bad decisions in training camp and we can't trust him, then realistically, the best you can cap him against anyone is 50-50, right? Because you never know what version of him is going to show up and perform. So when it comes to high-risk bets like this, I always say the value doesn't pay the bills, right? So even though there's a little bit of value on Kelleher, in my opinion, it's not enough of a margin that I need to place a high-risk bet. Because if this guy is 50-50 because he's chaos and he can't be trusted, you're not getting a great deal. Now, if Kelleher came into this fight with a grappling-heavy game plan, I think he'd do very well. He's not known for that. He's absolutely not known for that. He rarely tries to take his opponents down. But I know that he's got a decent ground game. He's got a very, very nasty guillotine. He does have a decent level of wrestling. And seeing Osbourne's past fights, I'm fucking damn sure that Kelleher has a big advantage over him on the ground. But whether he chooses to use it or not, who knows? And in a kickboxing match, Kelleher, questionable striking defense, not much power in his hands. Osbourne might be able to beat him just by being tougher, more athletic, and having better fight IQ. Who knows? So that's my breakdown for this fight, boys. I only want to put my money in strong positions. I don't see any strong position on this fight because from very reliable sources and from the shit that Kelleher's posted on his Twitter, I can't trust him at close to even money. But this for me is a clear dog or pass situation. You can't bet Osbourne as a favourite. If you must bet this fight, take Kelleher. For me, I'm going to pass. But yeah, I don't think Kelleher's a terrible bet. It's just not personally for me. It's not the kind of bet I want to kick off the year with, because I want to kick the year off with a win, man. I don't want to be putting money in any high-risk situations to kick off the year. Because, boys, I have a big bet on this card. I really do. I've bet quite a bit of money on Nasrat Haqparast. And I'm pretty fucking confident in him, actually. I think he comes through for us. I have bet, as you can see here, I have bet 3 units on Nasrat Haqparast. So I've bet a few thousand on this guy. Pretty fucking confident. Of course, the problem is, it's a bit awkward talking about this bet with you guys, because I bet him when his odds were around 1.43, which is minus 233. Since then, his odds have been absolutely murdered, and they continue to decline. He is now down to around 1.29 on some sites. He's got absolutely fucking steamed. So from where we bet him at 1.43, he was around about 1.3 for a decent amount of time, about a week there, and then his odds got absolutely smashed. So he's now down to around 1.30, which is minus 333 for an implied probability of around 77%. But I did bet him all the way back before Christmas on the 22nd of December, and the odds have been annihilated since then. So this is a complicated fight for me to talk about. I feel a little bit dirty talking about it, because I feel at these odds, Haqparast is a great bet. Personally cap him at around about 75%. These odds, though, I don't like him so much, because with the current implied probability at odds of 1.30, being 77%, that puts him roughly right at where I cap him, which means there's no longer value there. But I'll share with you the reasons why I think Haqparast is a great bet anyway. At these odds, I'll break the fight down, and you can decide what to do with that information. Obviously, I don't recommend betting Nasrat at these odds now. There's no value there, but I think he was a fucking great bet at these odds when we bet him before Christmas. So let's talk about the reasons why I think he's a great bet. So when we talk about fighters and how they match up with their opponent and how they could potentially beat their opponent, we always focus on what they can do offensively, what they can do to their opponent to cause them a problem. But Nasrat Haqparast is very unique. He's one of the few fighters that I've really broken down in the last 12 months where we focus more on what they do defensively than what they do offensively. Because Nasrat Haqparast's striking defense is truly excellent. It is some of the best in the lightweight division. And the scary thing is, Haqparast is only 24 years old and he's still making significant improvements from fight to fight. Huge improvements. So every time we see him, he just gets better and better and better. But the thing that I love about Haqparast is he's very intelligent, has great fight IQ, he knows how to stick to a game plan, he doesn't put himself in any unnecessary danger, he understands the importance of winning rounds, and defensively he is superb. And you guys know me, I don't like to use stats because I feel stats are very, very misleading. You know, the problem with stats is fighters fight so infrequently, you know, often just once or twice a year, that stats aren't really that useful because fighters don't spend enough time in the cage to rack up enough output that actually make the stats worthwhile. It's like if you take a look at football, for example, teams spend thousands of minutes on the field across a football season, you know, racking up points and stats on different aspects of each individual area of the game. It's not like that in MMA. Fighters only spend 5 minutes, 10 minutes, 15 minutes in the cage in one fight, maybe just, you know, 20, 25 minutes in the cage in a year. You don't have that much time to accrue good quality data and accumulate good quality stats. So stats are mostly useless in MMA. Also because, you know, different opponents can mess up the validity of stats as well, right? It's like, for example, if one guy, spends a year or two only fighting grapplers, then that might make his striking stats look a little bit better than they actually are. If he's only facing guys that can wrestle, that don't really have the best striking defense, that might make his, knockdown rate, his striking accuracy better than it actually is. You get my point. I don't like to use stats in MMA. They're very, very misleading. Also because fighters make huge improvements in short space of time, so stats are not trustworthy data in MMA. But what they can sometimes do is illustrate things that are true. And with the stats that I'm about to show you, they do illustrate that something that is very clear when you study fight footage on Nasrat Haqparast, because Haqparast's striking defense is absolutely outstanding, to put it mildly. In his last fight against Joaquim Silva, Silva landed 0 head strikes in first minutes. Now, Silva is no bum. Silva is a very good fighter. Silva was slightly better than even money in this fight, and I know plenty of people that know a lot about this sport that actually bet Silva to win. Silva is no joke. He actually has a pretty similar style to Drew Dober, and he landed 0 of 35 head strikes. That is no fucking joke. Haqparast is extremely good at making people miss, and you can see that Silva was only able to land 26% of the strikes that he threw. Incredible striking defense from Haqparast. A similar story in his fight against Mark Diakaze. Diakaze only landed 28 of 194 attempted strikes, only landed 22% of the strikes that he threw. And it looks like Thibault Gouti did slightly better in this fight. It says 56 strikes of 252 attempted to the head. This stat is incorrect, guys, and it's one of the reasons why stats are difficult to use in MMA. They're quite often wrong. Trust me, Gouti didn't land 56 head strikes in this fight. If you go back and watch it, the vast majority of these 56 strikes were blocked by Haqparast. They landed on the gloves, the arms, the shoulders, but whoever's been counting the stats on this fight counted them as significant strikes. They weren't. Haqparast blocked a huge percentage of these strikes, I'd say as much as half. So there's a similar story in this matchup. But Haqparast is excellent defensively. Very, very difficult to hit. Does a good job of slipping power strikes and answering back and punishing his opponent with fast hands, brutal combinations. He's very, very technical. And the thing that I really love about Haqparast is he is old, he is wise beyond his years. He's only 24 years old, but he does not get sucked into exchanges. No matter how aggressive his opponent is, no matter how much they try and bait him into an exchange, when they come forward and get aggressive, he covers up with a high boxing guard, circles away from them, and then resets and gets back into kickboxing range. He will not get sucked into a reckless exchange, and I love that. He is so disciplined, and you can definitely see the influence in his fighting style from the guys at TriStar, Firas Zahabi, George St. Pierre. And I really want to touch on this George St. Pierre thing for a second, because George St. Pierre is a millionaire, very successful guy, doesn't corner many guys, doesn't support many guys. There have been tons of talented fighters at TriStar over the years. he rarely corners Rory McDonald. He doesn't fight. He didn't corner guys like Joe Duffy or John McDessie. There are plenty of guys at TriStar that the GSP could have got behind over the years, but really the only guy we've ever seen him fully support is Francis Carmont, and now he is fully supporting Nasrat Haqparast. Has a great relationship with Haqparast. Corners Haqparast. We can see him here. He cornered Haqparast for his last fight against Joaquim Silva, and the influence of GSP on Haqparast's fighting style is clear as day. It is clear to see. It is a beautiful thing, actually. You can really see Haqparast really learning from GSP and using the same strategies, the same fight IQ, everything. There are so many similarities. So we know that the TriStar style of fighting is always focused on winning rounds. They understand the importance of winning rounds, and you see that with Haqparast. He always finishes rounds stronger. We know that generally speaking, judges tend to score fights in favour of the fighter that finished the round the strongest, and you'll always see Haqparast in the final 30 seconds or minute of a round crank things up to put his stamp on the round, and I love that. And if you think about GSP, what he really brought to the table, one of the reasons why GSP is one of the greatest fighters of all time, GSP isn't great at anything. He isn't. He's not great at anything. He's just good at everything. He's a good striker. He's a good wrestler. He's good on the ground. He's not great at any of these things. But the thing about GSP is, because he's reasonably good everywhere, he is humble enough to take the fight to the area that you're weak. So if he's fighting an elite striker, he knows he can't compete with him in striking, so he will take him down and control him on the ground. That's what made GSP great. He was good enough to cause guys big problems in all areas, so he would look at the biggest weakness in his opponent and he would go after that. He would exploit it, and many fighters are too proud to do that. We'll talk a little bit about it throughout this video, particularly with Donald Cerrone later on, where he's probably going to want to try and stand and strike with Conor. GSP wouldn't do that. He would see Conor has a clear weakness when it comes to takedown defense and ground game. He would immediately look to exploit that, and I see that in Haqparast. He's so intelligent, doesn't take any unnecessary gambles, and that could be huge in this fight. I love GSP's influence in his fighting style, and it is clear as day. It is there for all to see. So if we look at what Dober brings to the table, he's a heavy-handed southpaw, very similar to Joaquim Silva, in that he likes to load up on his shots and wing big looping wide hooks. He's got decent kicks, but really his biggest weapon is these big looping wide hooks that he likes to throw. And realistically, maybe he sneaks something through and lands a bomb and hurts Haqparast, but based on Haqparast's past performances, the big power shots, the big looping hooks shouldn't cause Haqparast too much of a problem. So he's very good at protecting himself with a high boxing guard and circling away from his opponent when they come forward and get aggressive. I think Dober's going to come out very aggressive. He's going to use the leg kicks. He's going to try and bait Haqparast into exchanging, and I just don't think Haqparast is going to be there for him. I think he's going to circle away and pick him apart with volume. And of course, Dober's no joke. He's a very decent striker, but the thing that I really love about this bet is that if Haqparast did get into trouble at any point when it came to striking, he's got his grappling to fall back on, just like GSP. Haqparast doesn't look like the kind of guy that's too proud to take an opponent down if he's struggling on the ground. And what is Dober's biggest weakness? Is his takedown defense and ground game. Very, very poor takedown defense and very low level on the ground. We've seen that throughout Dober's career. People will say Dober's a brown belt in BJJ, all that kind of stuff. Again, boys, like with Osbourne, I don't care what belt he's got. I don't care who he trains with, because the footage doesn't lie. And I promise you, Dober has a low level ground game and bad takedown defense. So if any point in this fight Haqparast starts to get into trouble, he can go to the GSP style of fighting, Firas Zahabi's coaching, the TriStar way of switching things up, taking the fight to the ground and exploiting Dober's weaknesses. And that's why I love Haqparast in this fight. Of course there are risk factors with any bet. He's only 24 years old. Maybe the pressure of him competing on a big pay-per-view card, facing a big step-up competition will get to him and he'll buckle under the pressure and underperform. Maybe the southpaw versus southpaw dynamic will throw him off and Dober will land a big hook or something to knock him out. There are risk factors with any bet. But the advantages that Haqparast has when it comes to striking technique, striking defense, and of course his grappling advantages made him an absolute no-brainer bet for me at the odds of 1.43. So I'm sorry, I would love to be coming here and being like, boys, I got a rock-solid bet for you to kick off the year. You know, we're going big on Nasrat Haqparast. I'm sorry I can't do that because the odds on him have got steamed. But that's fucking life, and there are plenty more events, plenty more fights for us to cover this year, plenty of fights for us to get through on this card, right? And who knows, man, I'm hoping we'll find one or two more solid bets on this card for us to make some money. But yeah, I think Haqparast at those odds was great. And you know, we see a lot of money flying around on these cards. A lot of casual money, a lot of people will be dog chasing. Maybe the odds will improve on Haqparast, and maybe you can get him at those odds that I bet him at. Maybe they'll improve from where they are. They've been consistently declining over the last 3 weeks or so, but you never know, man. But yeah, I'm big on Haqparast. I've got about £3,000 on him this weekend, so I'm hoping that he comes through for me. So the next fight that I want to talk about in this video, just going to skim through, make sure I didn't miss anything out. I don't think I did. No, it's all good, right? The next fight that I want to talk about in this video is going to be Anthony Pettis against Carlos Diego Ferreira. And you know what, boys? I don't know. I've mentioned this to you guys before, but Anthony Pettis is one of my favourite fighters of all time. I know a lot of people watching this video might be new MMA fans. You might have only started watching the sport when Conor McGregor popped up on the scene, or Ronda Rousey. If you love MMA now and you're a new fan, you know, you're quite young, you haven't been watching MMA too long. If you want to know why Anthony Pettis is one of my favourite fighters of all time, go buy Fight Pass and go back and watch this guy back when he used to fight in the WEC. Back in his early days of the UFC. WEC, yeah, WEC, UFC. His fights against guys like, you know, Alex Karalexis, Shane Roller, Benson Henderson was a fucking legendary fight back in 2010. Anthony Pettis is one of the best, man. I love Pettis so much that I paid a ridiculous amount of money for this Duke Rufus t-shirt, boys. I always wear it, right? I always wear the Duke Rufus t-shirt. Duke Rufus Kickboxing, baby, 1988. I always wear this Duke Rufus t-shirt when I'm breaking down Anthony Pettis fights. I fucking love him, boys. He's one of my favourite fighters of all time. And yes, alright, his better days are behind him. He's on the decline. Father Time's caught up with him. He hasn't been the same since USADA, but Pettis, I've got so many happy memories of watching Pettis over the years, back when I first started to get into the sport, you know, back in like 2009 when my son was born. I fucking love it. Anthony Pettis is the man. And here I am, rocking the Duke Rufus 1988 kickboxing t-shirt. But you know what, boys? The thing about this game is you can't have favourites. You can't bet emotionally, right? I don't give a fuck about any fighter, whether they win or lose. I have no favourites, boys. Like, I love fighters on like a fan level, but on a betting level, you have to detach yourself. And the sick thing about me wearing this Duke Rufus t-shirt is that I feel like every time I wear it to break down an Anthony Pettis fight, we're betting against him. And we're talking about his weaknesses and all the things that he does wrong. I mean, who could remember back in August when we bet on Diaz to beat him, right? We bet against Anthony Pettis, right? Bet on 1 unit on Diaz, yada, yada, yada. All the reasons why we bet on Diaz. We bet 1 unit on Diaz at underdog odds. And of course, Diaz came through for us in a big way and won the fight. We won that bet on Diaz, and I broke that fight down. I told you all to bet Diaz while I was wearing my Duke Rufus t-shirt. Now, am I going to tell you to bet on Carlos Diego Ferreira? Well, you know I'm not, because you've already seen the fucking betting tip article where I said no bet. But it ain't as simple as that, boys, because Carlos Diego Ferreira is a fighter that is definitely on my radar as a potential bet. So the problem with Ferreira, there are a few problems with him, but I do like him as a potential bet. So just on the last fight, we were talking about this being a big pay-per-view card. Lots of money is going to be flying around on this card, and we're likely to see a lot of line movement over the next few days. Now, I'm hoping the odds improve on Ferreira, because if we look at the current odds, they're currently around about an average of, call it 1.43, which is minus 233 for an implied probability of 70%. I roughly cap Ferreira at about 70%. So for me, the odds right now are exactly where they should be, and there's no value. But as you can see, over the last few days, Ferreira's odds have started to improve. We can see all the green arrows pointing upwards here. We see on this website, he's 1.47. And if we look at the odds movement chart, we can see his odds have slowly started to creep up. Slowly started to creep up from 1.40. And we can see opened at 1.61. Now, there's going to be a lot of casual money floating around on this card. You know, Conor McGregor brings all the boys to the yard, as Khalees would say. It's going to be a lot of casual money flying around. And at the end of the day, Anthony Pettis is a big name, right? He's a big name. There aren't a lot of big names on this card, to be honest. There's a lot of, you know, prospects, up-and-coming fighters. You know, people are going to potentially, you know, casual fans that only return up for the McGregor fights are potentially going to look at this card and be like, fuck me, I don't even know who Diego Ferreira is. Anthony Pettis, a big underdog, that don't make sense. I'll roll the dice on Pettis, and if all that casual money comes in, which will far outweigh sharp money, there's far more dumb gamblers out there than sharp gamblers, you know, that could lead to the odds improving on Anthony Pettis, which would help us get a better deal on Ferreira, and they wouldn't have to improve that much from where they are. You know, he's currently around about 1.43. If his odds were just to improve up to around 1.57, that'd give him an implied probability of about 64%, which would give us a good margin over where I cap him at roughly 60%. So at the moment, Diego Ferreira is a no bet for me. But he's absolutely on my radar and someone that I'm definitely keeping an eye on. And I know that's fucking treason to say that in my Duke Rufus t-shirt, but I do feel like this is a good stylistic matchup for Diego Ferreira. But as well, with every bet, there are risk factors, and I need to get a good risk to reward ratio to ensure I'm putting my money in a strong position. And the risk at his current odds is just a bit too steep for me. But now that I've talked so much about that, let's explain the reasons why I cap him at 70%. So the first and most obvious reason to favour Ferreira here is that he is a strong offensive wrestler, and of course Anthony Pettis doesn't have the best takedown defense, and he's not the best off his back. You know, we look at his last fight, the way that Diaz was able to win so dominantly was by taking Pettis down and controlling him on the ground, and we know Diaz isn't the best offensive wrestler, and Ferreira is a much stronger offensive wrestler and a much higher level on the ground than Diaz. You know, Ferreira, super high level Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu black belt, heavy top game, strong offensive wrestler. If he goes to his grappling in this fight, it could be an easy night's work for him. Now, frustratingly, Ferreira is one of these high-level grapplers that doesn't really use his grappling that much. You know, he tends to only really shoot maybe 1 or 2 takedowns per fight, but when he does commit very hard to it. And if he does get Pettis on the ground, he can cause Pettis huge problems because, you know, I know Pettis is a very high-level Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu black belt as well, but there are levels to this game, and I mean, Ferreira is up there, man. He's one of the best Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu practitioners in the UFC's lightweight division. He's no joke. Now, Ferreira is an interesting one because he obviously has issues making weight at 155 pounds. I feel like a broken record. Every time we see him weigh in, he looks absolutely terrible. He looks like death on the scales. He looks like Skeletor. But somehow, he seems to have an amazing chin and cardio for days. Like in his last fight against Mairbek Taisomov's usually a guy with legendary cardio. They fought in the desert in Abu Dhabi on the Khabib Poirier event, and yet Ferreira sprinted for the whole 3 rounds and didn't slow down, and Taisumov was the one that gassed out and slowed down, despite the fact that Ferreira was the guy that looked like death at the weigh-ins. So I do expect Ferreira to look terrible at the weigh-ins this week, but I wouldn't put too much weight on that because he always looks terrible and he still performs very well. Now, of course, one of the things that can suffer when it comes to a bad weight cut is your chin can suffer, right? You know, you're dehydrating your body, you're dehydrating the brain. That makes you more susceptible to being knocked out. And for the most part, Diego Ferreira looks tough as fuck and has a very good chin. He's very hittable, but he seems to take it very well. But at the same time, another one of the reasons why wiki capping and using stats is so dangerous is because, you know, fighters' MMA records can be really misleading. Because if we look at Ferreira's record, he's 16-2. He's had 18 pro fights. It's very, very impressive. And in those 18 pro fights, he's only ever been KO'd one time by Dustin Poirier. And of course, there's no shame in being knocked out by Poirier. But yeah, he's only been knocked out one time. So to the naked eye, you know, you might be thinking, yeah, that's pretty fucking impressive, only getting knocked out one time in 18 pro fights. Ferreira's probably got a decent chin. But again, the win-loss records don't tell the whole story. If we look at it, Aubin Mercier's a grappler, Jared Gordon's a grappler, doesn't really have any power in his hands. Nelson's a grappler, tends to gas out pretty quickly, and he did have Ferreira in some tricky spots in this fight. Kabalov's not really has any power in his hands. He's more of a volume guy. And Taisumov is very dangerous. Taisumov does have devastating KO power, but he gassed out after the first round in that fight. So in the second and third, he didn't have the power in his hands to hurt Ferreira. So on one hand, the only having one KO loss in 18 pro fights indicates that Ferreira's got a good chin. But on the other hand, when you look at the guys that he's been fighting, it's more inconclusive. It's difficult to feel confident in Ferreira's chin because he hasn't really fought that many big hitters that could potentially hurt him standing. And the one problem with Ferreira is that in this fight, his style of striking is both a strength and a weakness because he's a pressure fighter, man. He loves to come forward, has pretty good boxing, pretty good at cutting the cage off, and he loves to get in people's faces and basically make it an ugly fight. You know what I mean? He is a pressure fighter, and that is the reason why I like him in this matchup, because as well as having his grappling advantages, he also has the style to cause Pettis big problems standing. Because if we think about the style of fighter that has caused Pettis a problem throughout his career, is pressure fighters. We look at some of the fighters that Pettis has struggled against. Nate Diaz, he's a pressure fighter. Tony Ferguson, he's a pressure fighter. Dustin Poirier, he's a pressure fighter. Eddie Alvarez, he's a pressure fighter. Rafael dos Anjos pressured him to death. They're all pressure fighters, and Pettis historically has struggled against pressure fighters, and Ferreira is a pressure fighter. More interestingly, if you go back and watch Pettis' fights against Nate Diaz and against Ferguson and also against Poirier, you'll see that Pettis tends to, I'm not going to use the word gas out, but if you pressure Pettis and make him work, he slows down significantly after 6 or 7 minutes. And that's significant because Ferreira's got cardio for days. So I think if Ferreira can make it out of this first round and keep pressuring Pettis, I think we'll see a big momentum shift in the second round. Ferreira will win the second half of the second and the third. That's why I like him in this fight. But of course, the problem with being a pressure fighter is, if you think about the characteristics of pressure fighters, if we think about, some of the best pressure fighters in the game, you think about guys like Nate Diaz, Justin Gaethje, Tony Ferguson. Well, what do these three guys, who are all some of the most devastating pressure fighters in the game, Gaethje, Ferguson, Diaz, what do these three guys all have in common? Well, they all share a similar weakness in that they're very easy to hit. They all take tons of damage. They all get rocked a lot. They're all very, very easy to hit, because the problem with being a pressure fighter, when you're coming forward and constantly putting yourself in front of your opponent in a position to break them down, you also put yourself in a position to be hit, and that is Ferreira's biggest weakness. Just like all the great pressure fighters, he is very easy to hit. He gets dinged a lot. He eats a lot of clean, hard shots. And again, if you look at wiki capping and how MMA records can be misleading, you look at Pettis' record and you're like, well, really, he's only got one win by knockout in the last 6 years, and that was a flash KO against Thompson. You look at it, when was the last time, aside from the knockout over Thompson, the last time he knocked anyone out was all the way back in 2013. No, it wasn't. It was all the way back. Yeah, it was all the way back in 2013 when he finished Cerrone with a body kick. Hasn't got a KO since. So you're like, well, this is how wiki capping can get you into so much trouble, because you look at Ferreira's record, only been KO'd one time in 18 pro fights. You're like, oh, he's probably got a good chin. And then you look at, Pettis, he's only got one KO in the last 6 years. And you're like, well, probably isn't that dangerous. But then you look at the guys he's been fucking fighting, man. Benson Henderson, legendary chin. Gilbert Melendez, legendary chin. Rafael dos Anjos, legendary chin. Alvarez, legendary chin. Do you know what I mean? Holloway, Miller, Poirier, do I need to go on? The guys he's been fighting are fucking tough. So it's no surprise that he hasn't won many fights by KO in the last 6 years because of the guys that he's been facing. So it's difficult to gauge the level of risk in betting Ferreira simply because we haven't really seen his chin tested that much, and we know Pettis is a dangerous counter striker that, you know, when Ferreira's coming forward with a lot of aggression there to be hit, we know Pettis is going to connect, and the question really becomes, is Ferreira going to be able to take his shots? So I do think this is a very good stylistic matchup for Ferreira because of his grappling advantages and the fact that Pettis struggles against pressure fighters, but Ferreira's there to be hit, and in round 1 at least, Pettis is very dangerous. So at the current odds, I don't like a bet on Ferreira. The odds are too steep for me. But I also don't like a bet on Pettis because even as a big underdog, this is a difficult stylistic matchup for him. And I am keeping a close eye on Ferreira's odds because if they get closer into that 1.57, 1.60 territory, which is where they opened, which would be around, minus 167. If they get into that territory, then, I think that's a decent risk to reward ratio given the advantages Ferreira has. I'm happy to take a gamble on him at those odds, but at the current odds, it's a pass for me. So I'm sorry to be boring, boys, but I'm fucking dead serious. This is what I do for a living, man, and I want 2020 to be our biggest year ever. So if I don't see strong positions to put my money, I don't give a fuck that this is a big event. I'm going to stay disciplined. I'm going to keep digging. I'm going to keep doing the research. I'm going to keep hunting for those strong positions. So that is a pass for me. And now, boys, I mean, look, there we go. Duke Rufus Kickboxing, 1988. There it is. And Anthony Pettis is Duke's most famous student out of Rufus Sport. He has been training at Rufus Sport forever. And like we saw when we looked at his record, he's been competing at the highest level of mixed martial arts since way back in 2009. And, to some extent, it's kind of disrespectful to refer to Pettis as the old school because, he's still very good. He's still going to cause a lot of guys a problem. But we have spoken a little bit about a veteran there, a little bit about the old school. Now, let's talk about the new school, the future. Macy motherfucking Barber. And wow, she doesn't have the Rufus Sport logo on her Tapology page. But of course, the new school is Macy Barber, and she does train at Rufus Sport. Here we can see her alongside Anthony Pettis, who we just spoke about, alongside the legend, motherfucking Duke Rufus. Yeah, here she is, Macy Barber, and my fucking God, there is a lot of hype on this girl. There is a hell of a lot of hype on Macy Barber, and similar to Ode Osbourne, I just don't get it. I just don't fucking get it. I don't get it. She's good. She's very good. She's very, very, very good. But she's also 21 years old. And like all 21-year-old fighters, she has tons of holes. She's very green. Very, very green. I just don't get it. I don't get it. She's looks great. She talks great. She's very charismatic. She's got an exciting style of fighting, but there's tons of weaknesses that opponents could potentially exploit. And this fight for me, man, it's just a fucking weird one. It is a weird one. Because when you look at the odds, you're like, what in God's fucking name is going on here? Like, honestly now, like fuck me, man. On the website, right, I list like who's the better bet on each fight, right? And on this fight, I put on my website that I think Modafferi is the better bet. And I had a guy come in the fucking chat room and he was like, "You're clueless. You don't know what you're talking about, bruv. How can you say Modafferi is a better bet than Macy Barber? She's gonna get smoked, bro. Barber's the future, bro. Modafferi's got no chance, bro." And I'm like, hang on a minute, mate. Hang on a minute. Do you have any idea what these odds mean? Do you have any idea what these odds mean? These odds in a professional mixed martial arts contest are disrespectful. There are very, very, very few fighters in the UFC that deserve to be capped at these odds in a professional mixed martial arts fight. Very few. And trust me, a 21-year-old fighter does not fit into that category. I'd get nervous about betting fucking Cyborg at these odds. I'd get nervous betting John Jones at these odds. Like, honestly, man, if you look at these odds, current average odds, let's close that down. Current average odds of 1.10 minus 1,000 for an implied probability of 91%. Do you have any idea what that means? That means this girl, you must cap her in the region of having a 95% chance of winning to get any value. Do you understand how crazy that is? Like, she could have a terrible weight cut. My hair's all fucked up. She could have a terrible weight cut. She could eat a dodgy breakfast and come into the fight feeling sick. She might be fighting injured. She might have had an argument with her boyfriend that has disrupted her training camp. She might have... the hype might get to her. She's talked all this shit, and now she's got to go and back it up on one of the biggest cards of the year, Conor McGregor card. Do you understand that irrespective of skills demonstrated in the octagon, there are so many X factors that can influence the outcome of a fight? And if you cap Maycee Barber at 95%, you're a fucking idiot. If you cap her at 91%, you're out of your goddamn mind. Like, in the only guys that I would ever even dream of betting in this odds range are long-term established fighters that have a long and consistent proven track record of showing up and consistently fighting to their full potential. John Jones, GSP, motherfuckers like that, not 21-year-old girls that are still learning their craft, still improving, still making mistakes. Maycee Barber is good, but she's not this fucking good. So I don't want to hear it. If you're putting Barber in your parlays this weekend, if you're betting, whatever you're doing, I see people thinking Barber's free money, checking her in every parlay. You're making a mistake, because Barber will probably win this weekend. But if you bet girls like Barber at these odds, long term, you are going to get annihilated. There is no way you'll be profitable on these kind of bets. For me, the only question here becomes, can you bet Modafferi as a big underdog? And that's where this fight gets fucking messy. For me, when I see odds like this, these odds, what they say to me is that the bookies don't want action on this fight at all. They think Barber's going to win and they don't want you to bet her. That is what I'm seeing. The bookies don't want action, so they're trying to scare you off from betting Barber by setting ludicrous odds. This fight, man, is a pain in the fucking ass for me. It really is a pain in the ass. Because if you're asking me if there's value on Modafferi, there probably is. But the problem with bets like this is that value doesn't pay the bills. And if Modafferi gets death shotted inside the first minute, well, it doesn't matter how much fucking value you got on her, you still lost money. And that is my problem with bets like this. If the Gillian Robertson fight hadn't have happened, I would be all over Modafferi here. I would be telling you that Modafferi is a great bet at these odds. But this fight here has got me feeling very, very, very conflicted, because these odds are outrageous. If we look at the odds on the fight, Modafferi currently around about 7.0, which is plus 600, which is an implied probability of 14%. Now, personally, on high-risk bets like this, I like to get like at least a 10 to 20% margin, which means you'd have to give her at least a 25% chance of winning to get any value on Modafferi. And this Gillian Robertson fight is really fucking getting at my ass on trying to find value on Modafferi, because everyone with eyeballs can see that if this fight stays standing, Modafferi is screwed, right? She has poor striking defense, no power in her hands. Barber is aggressive, she's nasty, she hits hard, she throws a wide range of strikes. If the fight stays standing, Modafferi is going to get murked. She's got no chance. But obviously, on the ground, Modafferi is a bit of a nightmare. She's one of these girls with a ridiculously heavy top game. When she gets on top of her opponents, it's almost like she weighs 1,000 pounds. It is absolutely outrageous how heavy her top game is. Barber does not want to be on the ground with Modafferi. If this fight goes to the ground, Barber could be in a lot of trouble. But of course, the problem is, boys, there's lots of problems here, right? So the problem is, one of Barber's... Right, fuck, where do I begin? So the problem is, Modafferi has a very heavy top game, but her offensive wrestling is really poor. You know, you'll quite often hear me talk about, you know, offensive wrestling, the intricacies of it. We'll be talking about it a lot in the Conor versus Cerrone fight that's coming up. But in order to get your opponent down with traditional single and double leg wrestling techniques, you really need to get in deep on your opponent's hips. And Modafferi can't do that. She's almost, you know, 30, or she's 37 years old. You know, she just doesn't have that athleticism to shoot in deep on her opponent's hips anymore. Her takedown entries come very high up above her opponent's hips. She's very stiff on her entries. And do you know what? Before the Gillian Robertson fight, I don't think that would have been that big of a deal, because the one problem with Barber is, because she's so aggressive, because she's so chaotic, because she just throws herself into positions and exchanges, she's like a hurricane. She's just crazy, constantly attacking. Fighters like that have this wild, uncontrolled aggression quite often slip on banana skins and end up in bad positions. So I could see a situation before the Robertson fight where Barber would come out crazy aggressive and then get caught off balance or walk into one of Modafferi's trip takedowns and end up on the ground underneath Modafferi in a terrible position. That's what I could have seen happening before the Robertson fight, and I would have absolutely taken a small gamble on Modafferi at these odds, because you don't need to see a lot in a fighter at these odds to take a gamble on them. These odds are outrageous. The problem with this Robertson fight is, in the past throughout Barber's career, we've seen her get overly aggressive and give up easy takedowns many times. If you go to my YouTube channel, search on my breakdown on you know, Robertson and Barber, I think we talk about this in much more detail than I will now. I think we've even got some video footage highlighting the weaknesses in Barber's takedown defense. But I don't want to show you that footage now, because I don't believe it's relevant anymore. Because Barber is 21 years old. She's making big improvements from fight to fight. She's training with Ben Askren. You know, she's got a great relationship with Ben Askren. He's probably going to be cornering her this weekend. She speaks very highly of him, how much advice he gives her, you know, how closely they work together. Here we can see her at Askren's wrestling academy. They have a great relationship. They spent a lot of time together. And that really showed fucking big time in her fight against Gillian Robertson, because in all her previous fights, she'd get overly aggressive and give up easy takedowns. Whereas against Robertson, when Robertson would shoot takedowns, Barber's hip strength, her hips were so solid. Like, Robertson, on a couple of occasions, got in super deep on Barber's hips, like super deep. And I remember saying, because I always offer like commentary during UFC events, alternate fight commentary from a betting perspective during UFC events for my elite members on my website. And I remember saying at those moments, like, Barber's going to get taken down here. Robertson is so deep on her hips. And Barber showed gravity-defying takedown defense to keep the fight standing. Cleared the legs of Robertson being able to chain into anything else particularly dangerous, like a single leg or a trip takedown. And really, I was just massively impressed with Barber's takedown defense and the improvements she made in this Robertson fight. Really, really impressed. Like, she's improved so much, which you'd expect for a young fighter, but truly impressive. And Robertson's offensive wrestling is so much better than Modafferi's offensive wrestling that if Robertson couldn't get anywhere near a takedown on Barber, when I expect Robertson to get in much deeper on Barber's hips than Modafferi could, it's so unlikely Modafferi will be able to get this fight to the ground. And of course, another problem is, if Modafferi did get the fight to the ground, and she didn't get a finish. Say she got a takedown in round 1, and you know, Barber was able to defend herself and make it to the end of the first round. Well, then Modafferi has got to get a takedown in the second round and the third round and survive being knocked out. And I just all round feel that is unlikely. I think the most likely outcome is Barber comes out, shows strong hips, shrugs Modafferi's takedown attempts off, and lights her up like a Christmas tree and knocks her out. That is the most likely outcome. And this Robertson fight just makes it really hard for me to take a gamble on Modafferi. So it's kind of like, it's just such a fucker of a fight. It's a fucker of a fight, boys. Because you know the odds on Barber are silly. They absolutely are. They're outrageous. But at the same time, I just don't see enough from Modafferi to bet her here. Because Barber's so aggressive and devastating standing. I don't think Modafferi can survive for very long in a stand-up fight, and that's why I'm going to pass. But fuck me, boys. I don't know why I even bothered talking for so long on a fight like that, but I did, man. I did, right? It's fucking done. It is what it is. I hope you appreciated it anyway. If you did, boys, hit the like button. Remember, if this video gets 500 likes, we do a big boy live stream on Saturday. And now I want to get into the next fight that we are going to be talking about in this video, which is going to be Alexa Camur against Justin Ledet. And in the background, what I will say is we're just going to play this fight in the background for certain moments throughout this breakdown, but I don't want to spend much time on this fight. I really don't. It is a waste of time putting any time or energy or thought into this fight, because we really don't know anything about Alexa Camur. There's basically only 2 fights available of him to study online. One of them is on UFC Fight Pass, and it only lasted 6 minutes. You can go watch him if you want, if you've got a Fight Pass account. And then the other fight is the one that I'm going to show you here between Camur and Boza, which took place in March 2018. I can't find this fight online, can't find these 2 fights online either. So we basically don't know anything about Camur. From the very limited amount of footage we have available of him, what I can tell you is that he's quite an aggressive single shot fighter, loves to come forward, take control of the centre of the octagon. He's quite aggressive, but just throws single shots, quite a basic striker. That's all I've really got to say on him. You know, there's really not that much information out there. He does train with Stipe Miocic, but it is worth noting that he hasn't been training with Stipe Miocic for this fight, because Miocic is obviously recovering from a very serious injury. And again, we will use the example of Devin Clark. It really doesn't mean anything that Camur trains with Stipe Miocic, because Devin Clark trains with John Jones and he ain't as fucking good as John Jones, and he's been training with John Jones a hell of a lot longer than Camur has been training with Miocic. So the fact he trains with Miocic doesn't mean anything to me. But here you can see he's just an average fighter, right? Just average boxing. You know, he looks very physically imposing, very strong. You know, he looks alright. But again, like old Osbourne, doesn't blow my hair back. In this very, very short fight of him here, didn't blow my hair back in what I saw from him, you know, in his Contender Series fight. I mean, what can we say about Justin Ledet? Justin Ledet has a pro boxing background, very, very good boxing, probably the best jab in the light heavyweight division. If the fight stays standing, based on what I've seen, I think Ledet will do very well. Does a great job of using his length, does a great job of fighting behind the jab. Very, very technical boxing. I like Ledet striking quite a bit, actually. People take the piss out of Ledet, they see him as a bit of a joke, but actually his boxing's pretty legit. Obviously, the major problem with Ledet is that because he has a pro boxing background, his takedown defense is non-existent and his ground game is at a very, very low level. Now, the problem here is Camur is a young, hungry, aggressive 24-year-old fighter, but because there's only a limited amount of footage available on him, I can't tell you anything about his grappling. I've never seen him try and take his opponents down. Don't know anything about his ground game. Obviously, his opponent has been knocked down here, and he's kept mount and hammered him with ground and pound. It doesn't really tell us anything. So if this fight stays standing, based on what I've seen, I think this will be a pretty difficult fight for Camur. It's inconclusive because maybe his striking is a lot better than what we've seen in the 7 or so minutes of footage available on him. But Ledet, pretty decent striking. I think Ledet will cause him problems. But obviously, if Camur shoots a takedown, puts him on his back, it could be an easy night's work for Camur, depending on how good his grappling is. Obviously, though, it's a big gamble to bet Camur based on that, because we don't know anything about his ground game. So if we take a look at the odds, both guys are currently around about even money, which I completely agree with. That's where the odds should be, because Camur is a complete unknown. And hopefully we get to learn a little bit more about him on Saturday. But that's all I got to say about that fight. There's no point in putting any more time or energy into it. Now, the next fight that I want to talk about is an interesting one. It is Maurice Greene against Alexei Oleinik. But when I first started researching this fight, I thought that it would be has got the obviously the grappling background, and I thought that this would be a classic case of just having to determine how likely it is that Oleinik would be able to get the fight to the ground, and if it stayed standing, I thought it'd be an easy night's work for Maurice Greene. But the fight actually became a hell of a lot more complicated than that when I started to research it, and Oleinik can actually win this fight standing, which comes as a surprise to me, and I'm sure that it comes as a surprise to you as well, because it's very, very rare we say that about an Alexei Oleinik fight, because obviously Oleinik is, he's 42 years old, his striking defense is poor, he's very slow, he's very stiff, he's very rigid, he's very easy to hit, and you probably have these visions in your mind of Greene, being very light on his feet, being a good technical kickboxer. But when I went back and watched Greene's fights, I was actually quite surprised at some real significant weaknesses in his striking that I believe Alexei Oleinik can exploit. And, let's first focus on those weaknesses before we talk about the grappling. So, when Maurice Greene first comes out for one of his fights, he moves extremely well for a heavyweight early in the fight. Very light on his feet. He looks very technical. He looks very dangerous. He looks like a fighter that should be a hell of a lot better than he is. But what I've noticed about Greene is, as soon as you hit him, his footwork, his movement, his technique completely goes out the window, and he actually becomes very, very sloppy. And like a lot of guys that are abnormally tall for the division, we can see Maurice Greene here, 6'7". A lot of guys that are abnormally tall for the division, a big weakness in these guys is that they don't move their head much and they're very easy to hit. And that is also a huge problem with Maurice Greene. Of course, there will be outliers like John Jones, guys like that. But if you think about Stefan Struve and Alexander Volkov, generally speaking, huge abnormally tall guys that are this tall are pretty easy to hit. Greene's very easy to hit, very susceptible to eating big right hands, and you'll probably think that Alexei Oleinik has got really sloppy striking, and you'd be absolutely right. But if you go back and watch his fights, you'll see that Oleinik really commits everything he's got to huge overhand rights, sits down hard on his overhand right and throws everything into it, and covers an incredible amount of distance when he throws that overhand right. And Maurice Greene is very, very susceptible to getting caught with right hands. He gets rocked, dropped, wobbled a lot off eating clean right hands. And with how hard Oleinik commits to his overhand right, I do think there's quite a good chance Oleinik actually knocks Greene out with a right hand, which I didn't think I would be saying. But again, I don't deal in opinions, boys. I only deal in facts, and that is what the footage is showing me. Go back and watch their past fights. You'll see the same thing. And throughout watching Maurice Greene's fights, another thing that really is glaringly obvious to me is that he's just quite fragile. He gets rocked, dropped, wobbled, knocked down a lot. Very hittable, very fragile, doesn't instill any confidence striking at all. But of course, Alexei Oleinik doesn't instill any confidence striking either. He's 42 years old, very easy to hit, like I say, very stiff, very bad striking defense. So I guess the point I'm trying to make to summarize how this fight looks like from a striking point of view is, yes, Maurice Greene is the better technical striker out of the two. Yes, Maurice Greene is very dangerous standing, but Oleinik can hurt him quite bad and potentially knock him out so this isn't as much as a striker versus grappler matchup as I thought, because Oleinik can actually cause Greene problems standing as well. But of course, we do have to talk about Oleinik's grappling because he is going to want the fight on the ground. And Greene is an interesting one because, you know, if you've watched The Ultimate Fighter, you'll know that the takedown defense was really his Achilles heel. And, you know, he has improved his takedown defense a lot. It's not actually that bad. But Greene is a fighter that just makes really basic fundamental mistakes. When Maurice Greene is actually focused on defending takedowns, his takedown defense is excellent, but he has lapses in concentration where, for example, say an opponent shoots a deep takedown attempt and they're deep in on his hips, he'll do a really good job of creating a wide base against the cage and start digging for those underhooks. But then for whatever reason, he might just take those underhooks out and start trying to elbow his opponent in the head. And that'll basically open him up to his opponent actually being able to complete the takedown. So his fight IQ in that sense is very, very low level. He has shown the ability to possess excellent takedown defense, but he also makes critical mistakes and poor decisions that can leave him wide open to being taken down. Now, I don't think that it will cost him too much in this fight because, similar to what we spoke about with Roxanne Modafferi, you know, Alexei Oleinik is very old now. He's 42 years old. He's had a million fights. And you'll see when Oleinik steps into the cage on Saturday night, his knees are usually heavily strapped up. He's battling some really serious chronic knee injuries. He's just a beat up old fighter, man. Tough as fucking nails. He's had a great career. But at this stage in his career, he doesn't have the athleticism and the speed and the drive and the timing to get in really deep on his opponent's hips and shoot those nice single and double leg takedowns. So I don't think that Maurice Greene's complacency when defending takedowns will cost him. But that doesn't mean that Oleinik can't get the fight to the ground. Because Oleinik at this stage in his career, he's accepted who he is and what he is. When I talk about a guy like Oleinik, the best example I can think of is Glover Teixeira. You know, Glover is a fighter around about the age of 40 years old. And he built a career on being a fearless warrior, a tough boxer, a guy that likes to get in his opponent's face and just mix it up with him, get into brawls. Teixeira loves a scrap, right? We all know Glover, what he brings to the table. But Glover's 40 years old now, and over the last few years, his chin has abandoned him. He's now very slow, very stiff, very easy to hit, gets dropped a lot, gets hit a lot. And Glover's accepted that. And in the last 2 years, Glover's gone from being, you know, a reckless, fearless striker to using his high-level wrestling and ground game to just look to take guys down and beat him up on the ground. And Oleinik, I see a similar level of acceptance in the limitations at this stage in his career in Oleinik. Glover's accepted he can't strike anymore. And Oleinik was never a striker, he was always a grappler. But Oleinik has accepted that he can't take his opponents down with traditional single and double leg wrestling techniques anymore. So you'll very rarely actually see him shoot single leg and double leg wrestling techniques. Instead, Oleinik is more of an opportunistic grappler. And his style of getting fights to the ground is to come forward with relentless aggression and pressure, you know, throwing huge overhand rights, putting himself in a lot of danger because he comes forward and he's very hittable, but he comes forward with a lot of pressure and aggression because he's trying to overwhelm his opponents and get them to make a mistake. You know, we saw it in the Mark Hunt fight. He did a great job of this. Mark Hunt was absolutely cruising in this fight. You know, every time Oleinik came forward, Hunt was just circling away from him and just chipping away at him. But eventually, Oleinik just kept coming forward with so much aggression, so much pressure, that Hunt made one mistake. Oleinik dived all over him, dragged him to the ground, and was able to submit him. And that's really what he tries to do. And one area that Oleinik will be able to get the fight to the ground in this fight is by capitalising on all the lazy kicks that Maurice Greene throws. Greene throws a lot of lazy, range-finding push kicks, teep kicks, leg kicks that are really slow, really telegraphed, don't achieve much, and Oleinik could quite easily catch one of these kicks and turn it into a takedown. Now, having said that, I've never really seen Oleinik catch kicks and turn them into takedowns. However, like I say, he is an opportunistic grappler that is looking to punish his opponents for mistakes. And let's be real, Alexei Oleinik trains at one of the best MMA gyms in the world. He trains at American Top Team. with some of the best coaches in the world. I am just a geek that sits in his pants, or actually I don't sit in my pants researching fights all day, because I can't sit in my pants researching fights, because I live stream all my research now, so I do actually have to get dressed. But I am just a geek from Wales that knows nothing about fighting, and I can identify these paths to victory for Oleinik. So if I can see that Oleinik could potentially catch these kicks and turn it into takedowns, I'm sure that the coaches at American Top Team can do the same. And I think this is Luis Pena. Has Luis Pena moved from AKA to American Top Team? Have they tagged him? Can't say. Oh my God! Has Luis Pena moved from AKA to ATT? Oh well, they say you learn something new every day, boys. Looks like he has, right? Maybe he's just spending a little bit of time there, or maybe he has made the jump. Very interesting. Very, very interesting. Guess we'll find out soon. He's fighting next month. But anyway, boys. Yeah, like I say, haven't seen Oleinik catch kicks, turn him into takedowns in the past, but doesn't mean that you won't for this fight, because that could be a clear way that you can get the fight to the ground. So this is a tricky fight for betting, boys. I know I've been saying it a lot in this video, but I'm only looking for strong positions to put my money, and this is a difficult one. It's a very, very difficult one, because if you look at the odds on Maurice Greene, he is currently around about a 1.7, call it a 1.75 favourite at the average odds, right? Which is average odds of around about minus 133 for an implied probability of 57%. To bet Greene in this fight, you've got to give him a better than 60% chance of winning, which you can't do. I think Greene's a very bad bet here. I think Oleinik can knock him out with a big overhand right standing, and if Oleinik gets this fight to the ground, Greene is going to be in a hell of a lot of trouble. Now, if you look at the odds on Oleinik, you think, well, is there value on Oleinik as a slight underdog? The current average odds on Oleinik, call it around about 2.10, which is plus 210 for an implied probability of 48%. So to be able to bet Oleinik here, I'd be looking to cap him at better than 55%, but on a high-risk bet like this, closer to 60%. Can you get there? I mean, it's a tricky one, right? Because realistically, it ain't smart to bet on 42-year-old fighters, especially ones in the heavyweight division who are easy to hit, very slow, and are coming back off a brutal knockout at the hands of Walt Harris. You know, knocked out in 12 seconds in his last fight. You know, knocked out, took a lot of damage against Alistair Overeem before that. And Maurice Greene is dangerous. I've criticised him a lot in this breakdown, but he does hit very hard. You know, he is dangerous. I could quite easily see him KOing Oleinik in 10 seconds, but I wouldn't bet on him. I absolutely wouldn't bet on him. So this is another fight where, look, I'm looking for strong positions, and I'm not going to bet on Greene's. He's got loads of weaknesses that Oleinik can exploit, but I'm not going to bet on a 42-year-old wrestler with questionable striking defense and a questionable chin. I'm not going to do it, boys. There's no strong positions here. Both guys are around even money. For me, if you really must bet this fight, it's a classic dog versus dog or pass fight. I would bet Oleinik. If you held a gun to my head and forced me to place a bet on this fight, I do think Oleinik's the better bet, but there's not a strong position either side here. It could go either way. It's close to 50-50. I think the odds are roughly where they should be. So it's an easy pass for me, boys. Sorry to be boring, but boys, stick with me, man. And 2020 is going to be a big year for us, I promise you. I am fucking dead serious about having a big 2020. So at the end of the day, you have to be disciplined. You have to pass where there are no strong opportunities. And fights like Greene and Oleinik, it doesn't matter how much you know about the sport. It doesn't care how much research you do. It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter how smart you are. It doesn't matter how much research you do. Nobody knows what's going to happen. It's a 50-50 fight, and the odds are telling you mathematically there is no value for you there. So fucking pass. Save your money for a stronger position, and when that strong position comes along, fire aggressively at it. That is how you'll make money in this game long term. And now we go on to the final fight that I want to talk about in today's video, which is going to be the big one, right? The one everyone cares about, the one you're probably here for. It is going to be Conor McGregor, the return of McGregor against Donald Cerrone. And fuck me, I have got a lot to say on this fight. I don't even know where to begin. I want to start off by saying, shout out to Donald Cerrone, because I set my website up 6 years ago, all the way back in 2013, and he has been an absolute money train for me within that time. Here we can see we have bet on Cerrone a bunch of times. We bet against him here, and we bet on him all the way back in UFC on Fox 10, when we bet on Cerrone to beat Adriano Martins. That was all the way back on the 25th of January 2014. So I have a long history of betting on the interwebs, and this way you first you're on YouTube, and my website's been around for a lot longer, and you can see Cerrone's been an absolute money train for us. We have bet him 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13. So we've bet on him 17 times, and he has come through we have bet on his fight 17 times, and we have won on 13 out of the 17 times. We're 13-4 betting on Cerrone's fight. So this is a guy that I feel I have a really, really good handle on. Feel like I have a really good read on how Cerrone performs. And yeah, man, I mean, where do I begin, boys? Where do I begin? Let me actually move this down a little bit. There we go. Where do I begin with this fight? Fuck me. Where do I begin? But shout out to Cerrone, man. He's helped me personally earn a fucking load of money over the years. So whatever happens this weekend, shout out to Cerrone, man. Okay. There's so much for me. There's so much. There is so fucking much that I have to say about this fight that I just need to break it up into different sections, or it's just gonna be hard for me to keep track of what I'm saying. So the first thing that I want to focus on in this video is going to be X factors. Let's get the X factors out the way. So the first X factor that I want to talk about is father time, right? There's no secret that Donald Cerrone is starting to get old, man, and unfortunately they say father time's undefeated, right? Catches up with everyone. And if we look at Cerrone, he's currently 36 years old, but in 2 months' time, he's going to be 37. And he's starting to look his age as well. You know, when you see him show up to fight week, you know, he's got a lot of grey hairs in his beard, receding hairline, starting to look his age. And he actually put out a documentary series on Amazon Instant Video over the last few weeks. And it's just one of these things where, you know, when you see him in like an MMA fighter capacity, when you see him showing up to fight week and he's doing interviews, and you know you're seeing him on fight day, you don't always see them and how they look for how they really look like in the real world, right? And there are a few scenes in this documentary series on Amazon where Cowboy's really starting to look old, really starting to look his age. You know, there's one scene of him in a bar having a few drinks with his friends, and he looks like quite an old guy, man. And that's obviously the first X factor, the first red flag that we've got to take into consideration. And obviously, you know, his last 2 fights hasn't looked great. It definitely signs that father time might be starting to catch up with him. So that's the first X factor that I want to talk about. The next X factor that we need to talk about is kind of one that I can't even believe we're able to cover, but it is the potential leg injury that Donald Cerrone is coming into this fight with. So if we look at this episode 2 of Embedded, I can't actually believe the UFC allowed this content to go out, but in this scene here, Cerrone is very, very clearly walking with a limp. See him walking with a limp here, and I can't even believe that the Embedded crew double down on this, but they actually zoom into his foot here. Take a look at this, guys. The camera actually drops in a moment, and they I think, or maybe we already missed the scene, you know. Did we miss the scene? I don't think we did, but here he's limping. Like, there's no doubt that he's limping, right? Absolutely no doubt. They zoom in a little bit, but yeah, he's clearly limping here. The Embedded crew doubled down on it by zooming in on his leg where he is limping. Any second now, I think. There we go. They actually zoom in on his leg, and like, I can't believe that the UFC let this content go out. Like, I truly can't believe that that went out. Usually, they try and cover this stuff up. You remember back when Chad Mendes fought Conor McGregor, he fought Conor McGregor on 5 days' notice. He had a broken foot, but the UFC helped him cover that up with the way they set up the media day interviews and stuff. They didn't expose him. They covered for him, and I can't believe that embedded video went out. And of course, because it is quite clear that he's limping, the MMA media did a great job of asking him about it this week, and this was Cerrone's response in an interview that was released yesterday. So let's see what he says about it.
We love sometimes.
I saw a couple online sleuths looking at the embedded today. They said you were limping a little bit down Fremont Street. What's give us the go there? There's something wrong?
Man, I knew that was gonna come up. People are good. Put a little limp. What if I just walk with the draw? Or maybe I stepped on a Lego. I got a kid now. No, I'm good. Look, boop, 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 boop. No, I'm fine. It's I just kicked the pad funny. It was just a funny nothing. Yeah, nothing.
Are you looking at the implications at 155, even though it's 170, you get a big one?
So Cerrone with a not really very convincing answer there, to be honest. Cerrone's just saying he kicked the pad funny, is nothing to worry about. But let's be real. In that documentary series that I just posted, or that I was just talking about, if you watch it, Cerrone says in the documentary series, you go watch it on Amazon Video. I think I bought all 4 parts. I think it was like £16, which is just over $20. It was fun to watch, especially if you're a fan of Cerrone. It's kind of like a feature-length embedded episode, but in that documentary series, Cerrone said that he has had, almost 50 pro fights, and he's never pulled out of a fight with an injury ever. He was kind of like bragging about it, and he said he never would pull out of a fight with an injury. He said he's fought plenty of times injured in the past. So by him saying that in that documentary, which was recorded in the last 4 weeks or so, was he kind of alluding to the fact that he's going into this fight with a leg injury, and has that clip on embedded confirmed that? Is he fighting with a broken foot, a blown knee? Who knows, man? But Cerrone is definitely the kind of guy that would go into a fight injured. So that is a huge X factor and a huge red flag for Cerrone this weekend. Something really significant that we should pay attention to. The second thing that we obviously need to pay attention to, I've just closed down that video and I need it. Fuck a duck. Fuck a duck. Bollocks. Alright, we'll get it back. We'll actually get it back now before I forget. Because I need to refer to another part of it later on, boys. We will get it up. Here we go. MMA Junkie. Oh, there it is. There it is. We will pause it there because we need it in a minute. Another X factor to talk about in this fight is that Donald Cerrone has talked at length, quite openly, about his anxiety issues before fights and how that's perfectly normal. All fighters feel anxiety, but how sometimes it really gets the better of him and has a huge detrimental effect on his performances. And the problem with that is, throughout Cerrone's career, we've seen on many occasions he has significantly underperformed in his fights. If you go back and watch all his recent fights, you can see he just didn't show up against Justin Gaethje at all. And that's the problem with Cerrone. He's always a 50-50 kind of fighter, because you never know when you never know if he's going to show up and be at his best, or you never know if the occasion is going to get to him. And he has spoken at length about this on his appearances on the Joe Rogan podcast, and obviously those podcasts are 3 hours long each. I didn't have time to dive into them and pick out specific clips for you to listen to. But if you want to hear Cerrone talk quite openly and honestly about his issues with anxiety and how it prevents him from performing at his best in certain fights, go check him out on the Joe Rogan podcast. I think he's been on there twice. But this is a really nice short clip from MMA Junkie, only a minute and a half long, where you hear it straight from the horse's mouth. So take a look at this.
I love fighting. It's like the scariest, most intense, fun feeling. I couldn't even explain it to you, but from right now, can't sleep at night, eating's hard, make the weight, half the battle's over, fight day, fuck, all your friends like, you're gonna kill him. No, bitch, I gotta go in there and fight. Like, it doesn't just go like that. Scared, let's go. Pack your shit, we're in the arena. all your teammates are fighting, your coach is there. It's crazy, it's scary. You go throw up in the bathroom. I do anyways. Then you're standing, you walk down the hall, and fucking lights in your face just like this. Now you're live on TV, you walked in the tunnel, and you're like, holy shit, 6 weeks, and it's here, and it's now. And I've been on the edge of a plane about to jump out. I've been on top of mountains, and nothing puts that fucking hair on the back of my neck feeling like walking in that fucking octagon, and they shut that door, and you're like, well, there's only 2 ways this can go, right? In or out. And come Sunday, man, like I said, I've won in my mind. Everything I've done is here. Man, the old WC kicking ass Cowboys back, and I feel it, and I'm hungry again, and I love it. And I'm looking for that feeling, man. I can't wait for it. I can't wait to stand in that octagon and stare across to see Yancey and think, God, you poor son of a bitch, you're the one who drew bad, and go out there and do it.
So there's Cerrone talking a little bit about his anxiety issues, but it's well documented, right? We all know that Cerrone really, really struggles to show up and perform in big fights. Throughout his career, whenever he's got to the big fight, you know, the number one contender fight or the title fight, he's always, I hate to use the word choked because I fucking love Cerrone. He's one of my favourite fighters of all time, but whenever he's got to that big stage, he's buckled under the pressure. And we know Conor is incredibly good at creating a pressure cooker, a high pressure situation in the octagon for his fights that he thrives in. Conor performs best on the biggest stage under the most pressure, whereas Cerrone historically is buckled. And we also know that Cerrone, I mean, he's a slow starter. He really is. So he can't afford to have any nerves. He can't afford to have a feeling out process or start slow, because you know Conor's going to come out the gate very, very hard at him. So that's another X factor. You know, Cerrone's nerves, anxiety, it's a big deal in this fight. But having said all that, Conor has got his own issues too, right? There's plenty of X factors when it comes to Conor going into this fight. And of course, one of the biggest X factors is really all the shenanigans that we've seen from him outside of the octagon and how much of an impact they are going to have on his career moving forward. Because there are many, many, many cautionary tales about combat sports athletes that made it big, made a ton of money, had a lot of success, and then went off the rails and then tried to get their careers back, and they never could. Really, the only two that I could think of that went off the rails and were able to get back on track were Floyd Mayweather and to some extent John Jones, but not really. I mean, if you look at John Jones before he went off the rails and after he came back, two completely different fighters. In my opinion, John Jones hasn't looked great over the last few years. He looked okay against Anthony Smith. He looked okay against Ovin St. Preux. And in my opinion, Thiago Santos beat him. I scored that fight 3-2 for Thiago Santos. So you could kind of say Jones bounced back, but I think the jury is still out. He's definitely not as good as he used to be. And of course, a fighter like Conor, with such glaring weaknesses, such huge weaknesses, you know, with his ground game, with his takedown defense, you have to question whether or not, after all the shit that he's done outside the octagon over the last 2 or 3 years, if he can get his career back on track. Because, you know, I can't play this interview for you because it's kind of like an undertone throughout the interview. But if you go and watch this interview, it's on ESPN MMA's channel, and it's Ariel Helwani's, you know, lengthy interview with Conor. Throughout the entire interview, Conor talks about how, you know, over the last few years, he uses the expression, over the last few years, he has lost, and the way he describes it is that he has lost focus. And over the last few years, he's been doing all kinds of stuff outside the octagon. I mean, does this really look like a guy here? Does this look like a guy that's got his shit together? I mean, realistically. Does this look like a guy that you would trust with your money? I mean, look at this guy. He went off the rails big time, and I love Conor McGregor. I absolutely love Conor McGregor. But in this interview, he has been quite open about the fact that he loves to drink. And he's drunk a lot over the last few years. and he hasn't been focused. You know, accusations of him doing cocaine. You know, scandals involving girls. He's been out there banging all kinds of girls. You know, there's pictures. I mean, what's going on here? If we could just scroll up a little bit, I think there's or scroll down. You know, what's his hand doing there in a hotel room with this girl? You know? If we look at the story of Conor McGregor, he trashed a Bentley. He hired a Bentley for a weekend and trashed it. And the company that leased it to him ended up suing him because he trashed the Bentley. You know, he's banging girls, snorting coke, drinking fucking whiskey, trashing cars. And of course, obviously, how could we forget when he assaulted an old guy in a bar? How could we forget? I am the biggest Conor McGregor fan ever. I am the biggest Conor McGregor fan ever, but even after this, I just can't get behind the dude anymore, man. It's just like, I've met a lot of people in my time, man, and we all have dark times, you know what I mean? We all have ups and downs, but in my experience, if you're a good person, you don't have it in your DNA to just punch an old guy in a bar. Like, I don't. Like, I look you dead in the eye. I would never punch someone in a bar. Like, I just wouldn't do it. I just don't have it in me. Unless they did something, like, terrible to me. Like, I was forced to defend myself, fighting for my... I couldn't do it. I'm not that type of guy. You know what I mean? I'm sure you're not. I'm sure many of you watching this aren't. It's clear McGregor's had big issues. Big issues. And throughout this interview, he talks about having lost focus over the last few years. He talks about, you know, being hungry and motivated again. But where has that motivation come from? Because when he assaulted that old guy, that was in April last year, April 2019, less than 1 year ago. Less than 1 year ago. And when did Conor get back in the training camp for this fight? Well, it was in August, right? He talks about it in this interview if you watch it. So McGregor started getting back into training for an MMA fight in August. It was 5 or 6 months ago. Now, that's a coincidence, because if you take a look on Google, I wasn't planning to show you this, but Conor McGregor assaults old guy, right? Take a look at this. Conor McGregor assaults old guy. When did the video break? It broke in August, okay? The video was released in August 2019. But he actually did it, if we look at the article, it actually took place the incident was in April 2019. So less than 1 year ago, 8 months ago, Conor McGregor was off the rails and in such a crazy state in his life where he went into a bar in Dublin in broad daylight in the middle of the day in the afternoon and punched an old guy in the face. Less than a year ago, 8 months ago, right? That's fucking not that long ago, right? In this interview, he says he started training again in August, which is no coincidence that is when the story broke, that he'd actually punched an old guy. They managed to cover it up, up until then, between April and August. So for me, where he's talking about being focused again for the first time in a long time, motivated to fight, it's quite clear to me where this motivation is coming from. This motivation is coming from a place where he is trying to repair his public image. Because when you do all these things, it affects your ability to do business deals. It affects your ability to get advertising deals and brand endorsements. People don't want to do business with you. Big corporations, big businesses, big brands don't want to do business with someone like Conor McGregor when they have all this bad shit attached to them and associated with them, because they don't want their brand to be associated with that. It brings their brand into disrepute. We see it happen, every time a big sports star or a big celebrity gets involved in a scandal. They get dropped by brands and lose these huge advertising deals. John Jones said that he lost so many advertising deals. He lost millions of dollars when the news broke of him hitting that pregnant lady. I think Tiger Woods lost hundreds of millions of dollars in a Nike deal when it came out that he was cheating on his wife and doing all that crazy stuff. It's bad news. So I believe the reason why Conor got back into training in August and is coming back to fight, this is a PR mission. This is a PR mission to get his career back on track. And that is the reason why he is whiter than white this week. No trash talk. Being friendly and positive to MMA media. He is like the white knight of MMA at the moment. He's whiter than white. He's on his best behaviour. He's being kind and charismatic and respectful to everyone. And that is because he understands that he has damaged his brand so badly that the only way to get it back on track is to detract and deflect away and turn attention away from all the crazy shit he's been doing and get everyone's attention back on fighting. And by being, portraying this role of being a good person and being positive and treating everyone with respect, that is going to help people forget about the dark shit that he's done over the last few years. But that was only 8 months ago. Now, where am I going with all this, right? Why am I focusing so much on this in an MMA breakdown? Well, I'm focusing on this because I feel it's a very, very important X factor to take into consideration in this fight. Because it doesn't matter how motivated Conor McGregor is. It doesn't matter how focused he is, because the body cannot always deliver what the mind wants. And there are so many cautionary tales throughout history of combat sports athletes, any type of athletes, that got successful, earned a ton of money, went off the rails, tried to get their career back on track, and it didn't work out. There are very, 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 very few happy endings throughout history when it comes to stories like Conor McGregor's. Because think about it, what damage has he done to his body over the last couple of years? Snorting cocaine, banging girls, drinking loads of whiskey, going out on massive clubbing sessions. It's not good. You know what I mean? He even says in this interview that for his fight against Khabib, he would spar a guy in the gym, have a proper fight in the gym, then go out and celebrate, drinking and stuff, and then come back in the gym 3 days later after he'd recovered. It's not good. And even if he has put in the training camp of his life, even if he is motivated than ever before, who knows how much damage he's done to his body over the last few years? Who knows how much his athletic performance has regressed from all his antics outside of the octagon? And if you think about it, he's been really inactive. If you look over the last few years, really hasn't competed that much. We've only seen him compete twice since 2016. How much athletic growth has he missed out on? So I do feel this is a really important X factor to pay attention to. And it's quite clear that McGregor at one stage in his career was in a very dark place. How much has that period in his life taken away from his athletic performance? Now, he's only 31 years old. Very possible it won't affect him at all. Maybe he can get his career back on track. Maybe he can be an outlier. Maybe he can be one of these guys like the Floyd Mayweathers who's able to bounce back. I hope so, because I just can't help but feel Conor is a good guy, man. I followed his career from the beginning. He seems like a good dude, but good people generally don't hit old guys in bars in broad daylight. You know what I mean? I don't know, man, but it's something to pay attention to. So, that I feel is the biggest X factor to pay attention to when it comes to Conor. So now it's time for us to focus on the technical aspects of this fight. All right. So where do I begin with this one? Right. Let's close this down because we don't need it. How do these guys match up from a stylistic point of view? Well, this is one of those fights where I feel this is both a very easy fight for Donald Cerrone and also a very, very difficult fight for Donald Cerrone. And whether it turns out to be a very easy fight or a very difficult fight will depend on the strategy and game plan that Cerrone chooses to use. Because if Cerrone comes into this fight with a grappling heavy game plan, I think he stands a great chance of winning. Conor McGregor against Khabib did show, flashes of dramatically improved takedown defense, but can't help but feel that Cerrone's offensive wrestling will be able to catch McGregor cold, and if Cerrone really commits hard to these takedowns, he can get this fight to the ground. I personally believe that Cerrone's offensive wrestling with single and double leg shots is actually better than Khabib's. Now, before you all race down to the comment section to call me crazy, just let me finish. When you look at the style of wrestling that Khabib brings to the table, he likes to tie guys up, drive them into the cage, and then he changed between different wrestling techniques to drag them to the ground where he starts to beat them up. That's Khabib's style of wrestling. Cerrone's is completely different. Cerrone has very good level changes, very deep, aggressive double leg shots, similar to the GSP style of wrestling, where you'd see GSP shoot a takedown and drive right through his opponents, getting in deep on his opponent's hips. That's the style of takedown that Cerrone uses. Khabib doesn't do that, and I feel like Cerrone's type of takedown could cause Conor some big problems, because Conor loves to come out aggressive and take control of the centre of the octagon, and there will be level change opportunities for Cerrone to shoot in really deep on his hips and drag him to the ground. And on the ground, we've seen that McGregor looks pretty damn weak off his back. We know Cerrone has a very, very high level ground game, very, very heavy for a top position. It's very significant, but the problem with Cerrone is he does strike me as one of these stubborn fighters. And, we can't trust him to take this fight to the ground. It's very, very frustrating, because it's one of these fights where if it stays standing, it's probably going to go very badly for him. But on the ground, he stands a great chance of winning. But we just can't trust him to get this fight to the ground. And if we take a look at this little clip here, a reporter actually asks him about this. If we skip ahead to the 8 minutes 40 seconds mark, reporter actually asks him this direct question. Let's see how he answers it.
That I love. So if I could write it perfectly, it'd be a hard ass dragging through the dirt fight.
Many people have been asking why you take that risk and meet him in the middle and throw down with him instead of going for your awesome ground game.
Oh, because I'm not fighting for any of you guys out there. Yeah, I'm fighting for me. That's what I want to do. And then everyone says, why don't you just take Conor down? You don't think Conor trains jiu-jitsu? You don't think he's got somewhat, ever since he got submitted, he's like, oh, maybe I should work on that. Maybe I should work on my wrestling. You guys think I can just walk out there and just trip him, he'll fall down. I'm sure he's got good takedown defense. But I'm going out there to fight for me, not for anybody else. So if I want to go out there and stand, and can I take the fucking left hand? Can I take everything else? That's for me to decide. And I can't wait.
So, throughout Cerrone's career, he's been quite open about the fact that he doesn't do any homework on his fighters, he doesn't do any research, doesn't watch any tape, he just likes to go out there and fight. And we'll get into it a little bit later on when we talk about the striking, but that could get him into a lot of trouble here. But it seems here that he's reluctant to look to take this fight to the ground. Now, I always say to people, never trust what fighters say in interviews, because, say for example, Cerrone did have the game plan that he was going to come out on Saturday night, look to take Conor to the ground, dominate him on the ground. Well, you wouldn't be telling everyone in interviews, because that would give your game plan away. But the concerning thing about Cerrone is he does seem like the kind of guy that would just come out and try and stand and bang. I always use the expression, in my live streams and even in these videos, that many fighters are like moths that get attracted to the bug zapper. So many fighters, I'd even say on 30 to 40% of fights in the UFC, fighters have a clear and obvious path to victory. When if they just do that one thing, it's going to be an easy night's work for them. But time and time again, in such a high percentage of fights, fighters don't take the easy path to victory. They make life hard for themselves and they end up losing. And that's what we've seen Cerrone do time and time again throughout his career. And one thing that does really concern me about this matchup is one of Cowboy Cerrone's direct training partners is Joe Schilling. And that is a huge concern for me, because Schilling has got this kamikaze style of fighting. You watch any of Schilling's fights, he doesn't care about winning rounds. He doesn't have a game plan, doesn't have a strategy. He goes into every matchup with a kill or be killed style. And he either knocks his opponent out, or quite often recently, gets knocked out himself. And that's what worries me. When Cerrone's around these guys, if he has the influence of Schilling in his camp, I really don't trust him to fight smart. So it is a huge red flag that Schilling is one of his direct training partners going into this matchup. It's not a good thing at all. But as we transition into talking about striking, there are two reasons why grappling is a potentially huge path to victory for Cerrone. The first being, obviously, he's a very high level on the ground, a much higher level than McGregor, but also because when you go back and watch McGregor's fights, he only seems to have a good 7 or 8 minutes in him. past the 7 or 8 minute mark, he just doesn't appear to have the power in his hands to hurt his opponents anymore. Now, McGregor looks in fantastic shape coming into this fight. But if we look back throughout his career, all we can do is judge him based on his past performances. And he gassed out against Nate Diaz within 5 minutes. Gassed out in this rematch against Nate Diaz. If you go back and watch his matchup in the cold light of day, after 8 minutes in the second round, Conor is literally turning his back to Diaz and running away from him. Now, Diaz doesn't really have any power in his hands. He doesn't have the power. He didn't have the power to hurt Conor for gassing out and slowing down in this fight. And Conor was able to kind of catch breaks in different areas in the clinch and stuff, and end up, grinding out a decision win. But if you start slowing down in round 2 against Cerrone and turning your back away from him and running away, you will get knocked out. Cerrone literally has the technique, the power to just turn your lights off in a split second. You can't afford to slow down against him. And McGregor in this fight was kind of taking breaks and stuff in the clinch. There are no breaks in a fight against Cerrone. He gets better and better and better as the fight goes on. And in the clinch, he's got devastating elbows and devastating knees that can end the fight. So there is no area of this fight that Conor can take the matchup where he will be safe. And if he starts getting tired in round 2, he's going to be in a world of trouble. Because let me tell you, Cerrone's head kick is devastating. Cerrone can throw a head kick up faster and more accurately than most fighters can throw a hook. It's outrageous. The distance, the proximity, he can literally stand right in front of someone and uncork that head kick. And the head kick is particularly extra dangerous in this fight because both, Cerrone loves to throw the head kick from the southpaw position, and McGregor obviously fights southpaw. So where you get the southpaw versus southpaw stood opposite each other in the open striking stance, Conor's wide open to the devastating head kick of Cerrone. So that's something to think about when it comes to striking. But we're not done with grappling yet. The point I was trying to make is, with Conor only really having a good 7 or 8 minutes in him, again, we didn't even finish talking about the cardio. We said he gassed out in the Diaz fight. He also gassed against Floyd Mayweather, and he also didn't gas against Khabib Nurmagomedov. But if you go back and watch it, in the third round, Khabib is literally stood right in front of Conor. Conor is landing clean, hard shots on Khabib, and Khabib's just not getting hurt. He's acknowledging big shot landing. He's nodding his head to Conor as if to say, well done, decent shot. But Conor can't hurt him. He just doesn't have the power to hurt Khabib, because after 7 or 8 minutes, he just doesn't have that power in his hands anymore. Maybe that'll be different for this fight, but based on past performances, that's all we've got to work with. And if Cerrone can make it out of the first round, I think Conor's in a lot of trouble. And to finish up with the grappling, that's significant because, say Cerrone does get a takedown in round 1, he does get 2 or 3 minutes of top control. He forces Conor to carry his body weight. He zaps the energy of Conor, force him to work on the ground. It's going to accelerate the rate at which Conor slows down. If he doesn't slow down, it might just accelerate the rate at which the power disappears from his hands. And also, how is his power going to carry up to welterweight? Will McGregor look just as dangerous at welterweight as he has at lightweight? Because it's tough to say. Didn't look great in the 2 Diaz fights. So we know Cerrone looks a hell of a lot better at welterweight. He looks very, very healthy here. He's glowing. He's muscular. Very healthy. Very confident without having to kill himself to make 155. We know Cerrone has better striking defense at 170. He moves better. So the real question, though, becomes... There are a few questions. Let's get to answering the questions at the end of the breakdown. Let's focus on striking, or this is going to get out of hand. When it comes to striking, in round 1, Donald Cerrone is in big, big, big trouble because he's very easy to hit. He stands very upright, very rigid, and doesn't move his head much. And we know Conor McGregor is an absolute sniper. Devastating power in the first round, devastating accuracy. We know that if the fight stays standing in round 1, McGregor is going to land bombs on Cerrone. And you cannot afford to get hit by Cerrone. The problem is with Cerrone, you remember him, he's even said it himself. It's almost like he needs to get hit. He needs to get his nose bleeding. He needs to get cut in order to wake up. But you might not get that opportunity. If you get hit once by Conor, that might be it. You might not get an opportunity to wake up because he has put you to sleep. And that is a big problem with this fight with Cerrone and why he needs to get this fight to the ground. Because in round 1, if he stays standing, he's going to be in extreme danger. And at the beginning of this breakdown, we spoke a little bit about Cerrone and how he's starting to look old. And there is one particular weakness which has only really started to creep in his last few fights, which I noticed, particularly in his fights against Justin Gaethje and Tony Ferguson, which could really cost him in this matchup. And that weakness is that when you now land a clean, hard shot on Cerrone, when you hurt him, it's almost like he's got to get it back. If you go back and watch the Tony Ferguson fight in particular, every time Ferguson would hit him with a big shot, you'd see Cerrone kind of acknowledge it, like subtly acknowledge it in his eyes. You can see it kind of frustrated him, and in response he would blitz forward with a 2-3 strike karate combination where he'd literally come forward, chin up high and exposed in a straight line, throwing straight shots. Now you can get away with that against Al Iaquinta. You can get away with that against Tony Ferguson. You know, Ferguson's a volume striker, Iaquinta more of a volume guy. But when he then did it against Justin Gaethje, it cost him and he got knocked out in round 1. You can't do this against Conor McGregor. And I mean, if we look at his last few fights, Cerrone repeatedly got caught by Iaquinta's power right hand, but was able to eat it. But again, Iaquinta doesn't have the same power, doesn't have the same accuracy that Conor does. Repeatedly got touched by Tony Ferguson, but again, Ferguson is isn't a power striker. He's a volume guy. He breaks you down with volume. Landed a lot on Cerrone, but didn't have that one shot power that really hurt him. Of course, Gaethje does have a lot of power, but the concerning thing about the Gaethje fight is Gaethje's not the most technical striker. Very heavy leg kicks. But in terms of boxing, he just he winds up and uncorks big looping hooks. And the concerning thing is, if Gaethje can land these big looping winging hooks, then imagine what an accurate pinpoint sniper with fast hands like Conor McGregor can do. If Gaethje can land big power strikes on Cerrone, you bet your ass McGregor's going to be able to as well. So in round 1, Cerrone's in big boy trouble. And that's why he needs to try and get this fight to the ground. So the question becomes, how likely is it that he'll get this fight to the ground? And it's a real difficult question to answer. Because we know he's stubborn. We know that he's likely to want to get into a firefight with Conor. We know he's likely to freeze under the bright lights of the biggest opportunity of his career and underperform. But this is a very interesting fight, this one here, between Donald Cerrone and Alexander Hernandez. I recommend going back and watching this fight to see what I mean. In the first 30 seconds, Alexander Hernandez hurts Donald Cerrone quite bad with a left hand, snaps Cerrone's head back, really gets his attention. And in the past where we've seen Cerrone hurt bad, like in the Masvidal fight, in the Darren Till fight, when he's been hurt bad early in these fights, he's kind of gone into a defensive shell and, just got caught flat-footed with his back against the cage. His opponent has been able to finish him. Did something very different against Hernandez. When he got hurt off the left hand early, he actually circled away from Hernandez. And then as Hernandez came forward to go in for the kill, Cerrone shot a superbly well-timed level change and got a great body lock takedown to alleviate the pressure. Now, Hernandez is a big, strong, tough, athletic guy with a background in wrestling. He was able to pop back up to his feet very quickly, but I don't believe that Conor would have been able to pop back up to his feet as quickly as that, because Conor's quite weak off his back, and when you flatten his shoulders out on the canvas, it's quite easy to establish a dominant position on him. Khabib showed that. Chad Mendes showed that. So that's interesting, because if Conor did sting Cerrone, with a hard shot early, are we immediately going to see the level change, and is Cerrone going to be able to get it? It's interesting. It's so interesting. This fight really comes down to the takedown. So let's wrap this up really and summarize how I feel about this fight. from a betting perspective, that's what this is all about, right? So if we look at this fight from a betting perspective, the current odds on Conor McGregor are currently around about an average of 1.31, which is minus 323 for an implied probability of 76%, which means in order to bet Conor McGregor, you've got to cap him in the 80% range, which is impossible for me for all the reasons I've mentioned in this breakdown. The cardio issues, not even the cardio issues, the fact that he doesn't really seem to have the power to hurt his opponents after 7 or 8 minutes. There's that. All the shenanigans outside of the cage, how much that's had a detrimental effect on his ability to perform at the highest level. And also the threat of Cerrone's takedowns and the threat of a flash KO. I mean, like I say, Cerrone's head kick, from the southpaw to southpaw open stance is a serious threat to Conor. But at the same time, if we look at the odds on Cerrone, currently floating around about an average of, call it 3.60, which is plus 260 for an implied probability of 28%. On these high-risk bets, I like to get a very, very generous margin. We said early on with Roxanne Modafferi, I'm looking for 10 to 20% on these high-risk bets over the bookies. So to get that margin here on Cerrone, you would have to cap him at around about 40%. And there's no way I can get to that number. When you look at the anxiety issues and the fact that he tends to buckle under the pressure of competing in these big fights, and he always underperforms in these big fights, the fact that he's looking old, the fact that Father Time appears to have caught up with him, the fact that he probably will be reluctant to to take Conor down when we take everything into consideration, how stubborn he's been at times throughout his career. When you take into consideration the fact that he is very easy to hit. Gaethje's landed bombs, Ferguson's landed bombs. Even if Cerrone does come into this fight with a grappling heavy game plan, Conor might death shot him by the time he has a chance to get inside and work for a takedown. So there are lots of reasons which prevents me from getting to capping Cerrone at 40%. And I know it's frustrating for you because you're watching this video and you're looking for betting advice and you want to make money, and it's the first big event of the year, right? We haven't had a UFC event in a month and you're itching to pull the trigger and you're itching to make money and you're itching to place bets. But that's what the bookies want, boys. The bookies want you to make bad betting decisions. And you just have to be patient and wait for these strong positions. There are no strong positions on this fight. I think the odds, they're roughly where they should be. There's no value on these guys, right? Conor's probably going to go out and knock Cerrone out in round 1. What more can you say? So this is a year, boys, where you can make a decision, man. It's 2020, start of a new decade, and it's an opportunity for you to start to be real disciplined with your bets if you haven't been in the past, and think this year, for just 1 year, I'm not going to bet impulsively. I'm going to keep it tight. I'm going to only put my money in strong positions, and I'm going to see what happens if I do that after 1 year. Just see what happens, man. So there's no strong positions on this fight, so I'm going to pass. But I will keep digging. I've got 5 fights left to research on UFC 246. And if you hit the like button on this video, and this video gets 500 likes, I will live stream my research for those remaining fights on Saturday. We will go through all of them. It'll be a marathon live stream. I'll answer all your questions. We'll hunt for props. I'll talk about the remaining fights. We'll go deep. But you've got to hit the like button. You've got to hit the subscribe button if you haven't already. So I'm trying to grow this channel. I'm trying to do big things. And to do that, I need a bigger audience so I can bring you better, more creative, better quality, more exciting content than ever before. So if you've watched this whole video, man, thank you so much. It's been a long video and I hope you enjoyed it. Even though there weren't many bets, there weren't any bets aside from Haqparast, and even then, there's no value anymore. But I hope you appreciate the information in this video and the reasons why I've chosen to pass. And I'll just keep digging for strong positions, man. If you supported me throughout 2019 and even before that on my website, thank you so much, man. Every single one of your likes, every time you subscribe, every time you pay your monthly membership fees on my website, every time you like a video or leave a comment or email me or DM me, it fucking means the world to me, boys. And I really, really, really appreciate it. So take care, everyone. I'm going to be back tomorrow night, 9 PM UK time, with our live stream for the Askarov versus Elliott fight. If you want to hear my voice before that, you can check out my website, and I'll be live streaming my research for Andre Philly versus Sadiq Youssef at 1 PM tomorrow UK time. But for now, boys, thank you for watching, and I'm going to see you very soon. Take care.